Good evening, everybody. Mr. Radio Free Mormon, how are you this evening?
Super duper. Thanks for asking, Bill.
Excellent. This will be a fun night. It is the 3rd of September, 2025. And here we are, Mormonism Live. And we're happy to be here with you guys. We're glad that you are here with us. And this should be a fun night. Anything you want to say before we jump into the episode, RFM?
Yeah, I'm so glad that September is here. Looking forward to cooler temperatures. And I'm sure I'm joined in this by Tim Rathbone, at least.
Yeah, it's a little cooler here in Cedar City, but the last few days have been hot. So I'm excited about the fall temperatures on their way as well. Also, my birthday is in September. So that comes
What
around.
day? Pray tell.
The 14th of September. Remember the 14th of September. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's
But that does remind me in 2 days. Oh, it's November anyway. So it's September 14th. Let me write this down here so I can forget it anyway.
harass me and yeah.
9/14/25. That's going to be Bill's birthday.
Yeah.
And how old?
47, I think. I don't keep track that well, but 47, I believe.
I think that's a prime number.
So there you are. 4 + 7 is 11, and 11 in numerology means lots of interesting things. So I don't know them. I just know from people like you who are interested in numerology.
Oh, you're adding the two numbers from your age, the 4 and the 7, that you will be.
That is the trick. Whenever you do numerology, whatever number you need to get to, you figure out some way of multiplying, dividing, adding, subtracting, and then you tell the audience that it was there all along if they just would have seen it.
You're right. It is a very magical number. The problem is that you're turning 47 in a few days, but that means you're ending your 47th year. So all the magic is about to expire.
Well, there it goes. Folks, tonight, let me grab this off the screen. I'm going to put this one on, add this one to it.
Yes, Joseph Smith's legal battles. I'm thrilled that you thought to do this.
Yeah, I've been thinking about doing this for a long time. I'd mentioned it maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. It was one that I really wanted to make sure that you had some time to look at and put some thoughts together on, since you are the resident lawyer on this team. And
I am of counsel.
Yeah, and we will go. We'll go through quite a few of the cases. And let me just say on the forefront of this that there are lots of cases that Smith was involved in where he is being having charges brought against him and going to court for that reason. Where he's having civil cases where he's being sued, where the constable's talking to him, where the police are apprehending him. You know, that kind of thing. Where I should maybe not say police, but law enforcement's apprehending him. And there's too many cases to go into. Some of them don't have a lot of importance. These are the ones that Wikipedia spent time on. And I grabbed a few others that I thought were interesting as well. And then at the very end, I've got a few notes on a few other smaller instances. But I thought we'd start off tonight by talking about the Encyclopedia of Mormonism, which, by the way, one of the coolest things that I have, I read this when I first joined the church, the 4 volumes and an index, I believe.
Right. Well, the 5th volume was actually the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. Or was that a 6th volume? They reproduced it in that same format. The huge book.
This is I don't have that. So all I have is the Encyclopedia of Mormonism.
Yeah. It's
split up in like A through G, and then like the middle of the alphabet, and then I don't know, S through Z or something like that, and then you get the index at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But I read these. My ex-father-in-law had these, and I took them home and I read all of it. All 4. No.
You read all of these 4?
I went through, and if it was a boring topic, no. But if it was anything mildly interesting to Mormonism, I read the whole thing. And this is where I learned about the Kinderhook plates. This is where I learned about just tons of things. Adam God and how the church made its stance. And the Encyclopedia of Mormonism is not written by the church per se, but it's a very faithful telling of Mormonism. And it had lots of input from Mormon scholars and leaders.
I think it was published by Macmillan or something.
Yes.
But the people who were the editors were faithful Mormons.
Yes. So it's a very faithful telling. And I thought we'd start tonight with the Encyclopedia of Mormonism. They have a section here, the legal trials of Joseph Smith. Most of it is just going into the charges, and they vary carefully articulate how they want to frame each of those. So it's not going to be worthwhile to go into that. But I do want to read the first paragraph. I'm going to put us down below. Oh, that won't work. I'll put us back on the side here. Yeah, you're trying to sneak up over.
I'm trying to be able to see the screen.
Yep.
You know, I'm still stunned. I may be sitting here with the only person on the planet who actually has read all 4 volumes of the Encyclopedia of Mormonism.
Say that again.
I am stunned because I think I may be sitting here with the only person on the planet who has read all 4 volumes of the Encyclopedia of Mormonism.
Again, though, if we go to something like New Testament, I wouldn't have read that. But
Can
I
you
would
hold it up to the screen a la Carrie Shirts? Because I think it has 2 columns on each, 2 broad columns on each page.
Yeah, it does. 2 columns on each page. And it just goes topic by topic. It's sort of like an encyclopedia.
It's like Mormon doctrine for not so spiritual people.
Yeah, but like certain ones, Papyri, Joseph Smith, Papyri. So that's one that I would have read the entire thing of. And I took this home. I kept the 4 volumes for, I don't know, maybe a month or so. And just every day just went through and read 10 or 15 pages or so and went through it all. And there's just tons of interesting stuff. I was actually surprised at the time that they go into so much more detail in there than I would have suspected they would have wanted to talk about. Not that they're telling anything super controversial, but they have the controversial topics in there. Not that they're describing them in a controversial way or going against the church.
Yes.
But in this first paragraph, it says,
they're trying to be as academic as possible without compromising anybody's faith.
Right. Right. It is a faithful academic telling of all the terms and conditions of Mormonism. Joseph Smith, this is the first paragraph. Joseph Smith believed that his enemies perverted legal processes and using them as tools of religious persecution against him, as they had been used against many of Christ's apostles and other past martyrs. Although he often gained quick acquittals, numerous vexations and wicked lawsuits consumed his time and assets, leading to several incarcerations and ultimately to his martyrdom, beginning soon after his ministry began and continuing throughout his life. Joseph Smith was subjected to approximately 30 criminal actions and at least that many civil suits related to debt collection or failed financial ventures. And I read more than that. There were other places that reported more instances, and I'll give you places that you can read and see some of that information towards the end.
Once you get to 30, it's kind of academic how many more there are.
Yeah. So I'm just showing it. If you want to read these, you can pause the screen. But I just want to get to the very end and read the last sentence here, which says, although plagued by bad advice and misfortune in business matters, well, some of that was his own creation, but they don't want to tell you that. The prophet was never found guilty of any misconduct.
That's because he fled the law on multiple occasions. He ran out on the state that had jurisdiction and sought shelter and avoided process in another state.
Yes. He also did other things, which we'll learn tonight too, where he would have his local government that he has control of because it's all Mormons, and they would operate in a way that would then take the ability of the other jurisdiction to operate out of their hands.
Yes, they were able to negotiate a very strong city charter with the state of Illinois when they created Nauvoo, and they used it to their benefit, or I should say Joseph used it to his.
Yeah. So we'll see tonight. Again, this is the faithful telling, and this is the way that at least I, and I assume you, we grew up in Mormonism being taught that Joseph Smith was always being charged and arrested and sued and taken to court and told he had to, but we were also told that none of that was legit. He was persecuted. Nobody liked the Mormons, and all of that was non-members' fault.
Basically, yes. By the way, I remember hearing Truman Madsen on one of his tapes. He did a series of lectures about Joseph Smith. They achieved some degree of fame. Have you heard of those, Bill?
Is there a worse scholar in Mormonism than Truman Madsen?
Look, I don't know.
But I'm aware of Truman Madsen and his tapes. I'm not aware of that specific series.
Okay, good. No, I don't know, because what I was thinking was I could list a bunch of different names of people who are worse scholars than Truman Madsen.
I'd be hard pressed to name 3.
Oh, really? That's funny. I was thinking of exactly 3.
Okay.
Anyway, the whole thing about this is that he said, and I remember this, I was listening to this in the early 90s and having some faith shifting going on and wanting to hear what this very intelligent, philosophically oriented gentleman had to say about Joseph Smith that I hadn't heard 1,000 times before. And what he said was, in the last tape, I think there were 8, that he's about the martyrdom, that Joseph Smith died to get the correct idea of God back into the world. And he just left it there. He didn't try and demonstrate his point. I'm just sitting there going, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing the connection between getting the right idea of God back into the world. But it does suggest what you're talking about, which is that anytime anything bad happens to the Mormons, it's because they've got the truth. So Satan is inspiring the people to go get the Mormons because the Mormons have the truth. It's a sign that they're true.
Joseph Smith was changing theology so much that maybe you could argue that God got rid of Joseph so that he could keep theology right at the right time. But I think what you just said is not accurate at all.
Once you go off that cliff, you can say anything you want. At that point, reason and logic have nothing to do with the equation.
If Smith would have been left with another decade, Mormonism would have been completely different again.
I think that history has shown that Joseph Smith died at exactly the right time, at the most opportune time and in the most advantageous way. And I say that obviously not for him, but for his church.
Yeah, and you'll see some of that tonight too, because one of these lawsuits has to do with polygamy, and thank goodness Joseph being charged with adultery and polygamy died, and they essentially just dropped the charges. They never saw its day in court. So with that, I'm going to go to the first one here and put this up on the screen. So there's that. I'm also going to put the comments over on the bottom right-hand corner. I'll have to take those off sometimes so that we can see what's written there. But
when would you say that Joseph Smith's ministry began, Bill?
Well, this would be something people could argue, but I would say that at least in part, it has to be when Lucy Mack Smith said that Joseph Smith stood in front of the family and told stories long into the night about the characters of the Book of Mormon and what they had done.
The only reason I say that is because most people would give a date of 1829 or 1830, I would think, right? Or is it 1820? That's just God and Jesus showing up. That's not his ministry, is it? Maybe. But that it was in the Encyclopedia article that you had just read.
Yeah.
Where it said that that went back to, did it talk about his ministry in relation to the earliest suit? And at least that many civil suits, or let me see here. Beginning soon after his ministry began and continuing throughout his life. Do you see that line right there?
No, where is it in the top paragraph or the bottom?
Yeah, you read it.
Okay. Oh yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Soon after his ministry began. So they're counting the moment he goes into action, essentially 1820, right?
I think they're going from his first money dig. Because 1826, I would think most people would just think that's before his ministry began. I mean, he's been being sued since before his ministry. What they're trying to show is an unstated connection and causation between his ministry and his legal problems, which I'm not sure is really there.
Yeah, he doesn't even have the gold plates yet.
Let's just say it's a squishy definition at best, but they're using it to their benefit in this article.
They would have to be going off the first vision because, I mean, he's met with Moroni a few times, but he doesn't have the gold plates yet.
Nope.
Okay, so there's that. So we'll go through several of these cases. Again, we started off by telling you how the church presents Joseph Smith and the legal things that happened with him and how it's not his fault. Not only were the charges always trumped up and false, but often he was taken advantage of by bad advice and bad luck and all those other things that have to do with all the things except it being his fault. So we'll start off with 1826, and I'll tell you the cause of the case, and many of these you'll know, RFM, many of these the audience will know.
Yes.
We'll say the cause, we'll say the charge, I'll tell you the outcome, and then I want to get your thoughts from the legal side of things, and then after each case, we'll talk about any interesting aspects. There's a handful of these that have got some interesting details that follow. All right, so we'll start off here. 1826, disorderly person charge. This is the glass-looking trial. As a young man in New York, Joseph Smith worked as a treasure seeker, using a seer stone to locate hidden valuables for farmers like Josiah Stoll. This folk magic practice drew suspicion. In March of 1826, a member of Stoll's family charged 20-year-old Smith as a disorderly person, essentially accusing him of fraudulently pretending to find treasure. At the hearing, Smith openly acknowledged that he had a special stone and had occasionally been in the habit of looking through this stone to find lost property for 3 years, though he claimed he mostly quit because it hurt his eyes. Now, I bolded that because there's something interesting I want to point to after this. It's not a big deal within the context of the case. It is a big deal in terms of other things tangentially connected to it in Mormonism. Neighbors testified about his money-digging activities. Now, the charge he had was a misdemeanor charge of being a disorderly person, an idle imposter under New York law. Again, it's a glass-looking, it's basically somebody who's doing the crystal ball trick to take money from people and claim they can tell you things that they really don't have any magic power to tell you. This statute was often used to prosecute vagrants, con men, or tricksters. Smith was essentially accused of deceiving people with his treasure divining claims. Now, that's the charge. And then the outcome, contemporary accounts indicate that the court found Smith guilty of the misdemeanor and ordered him to pay court costs. The judge's bill of cost from 1826, this was unearthed in 1971, in fact, labels Smith the glass looker.
Wesley Walters, wasn't it, Bill?
Wesley Walters, yes, it was.
I thought it was.
Yeah, and it lists a $2.68 fee. It's $2.68 fee. However, no jail time was imposed. Smith was released and returned home. Later reminiscences differ on whether he was formally convicted or just warned and released, but the surviving record of fees strongly suggests the case concluded with a guilty finding on the minor charge. I'm going to get rid of that comments there. In any event, the young Joseph Smith walked away after his brush with the law, having been publicly exposed for his treasure-seeking activities, but not imprisoned. Your thoughts on this case and to start us off with?
Yeah. For me, after having been a lawyer for 35 years in criminal law, which I repeat, I'm not bragging. I just want people who don't know me to know this is what I bring to this question. The least important part of this case is whether Joseph Smith was convicted. To me, as an attorney, that $2.68 fee, I mean, there are court costs that are going to have to be paid by somebody, whether it's Joseph Smith or somebody else or the city or whoever brought the case, right? I don't know. So the most important part about this entire case is that in 1826, Joseph Smith appeared in court and admitted that he used a stone to look through to find buried treasure. And he had done so for about 3 years. That is mind-blowing. That's fatal. That's fatal to his entire story. The only way a person can believe in the later story, where it's modified to be gold plates and an angel instead of a treasure guardian, is through the power of faith.
I'll add here, it's only the apologist, as far as I know, that want to say, yeah, they say he's guilty, they give him a fine, but, we don't know what happened. And they only say that because we don't have any more of the record, but we have enough of the record to start with the assumption that he is found guilty. As you point out, he's convicted. And whatever.
I didn't say that, did I?
What's that?
I didn't say he was convicted.
What you said? What did you say?
I said it makes no difference. That's the least important thing about the case to me, is whether he was convicted.
Yeah. it seems strange. How could you find somebody if you don't have some sort of charge that holds up against them? Does that make sense?
Well, that's assuming that's a fine. The way I read it, it looks like it could just be court fees. There's a difference between a fine, which is a penalty to an individual, and court fees, which are incurred in every case.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, the court documents indicate that he's on the side that owes money, and he has a charge of glass looker against him.
I know you have copies of those.
Yeah, yeah.
I expect if someone had said that Joseph Smith has to pay this money, then obviously it would be more of a conviction, right?
Yeah, this is it. And it's on a docket. Now, this is not the docket. This is another page that coincides with it. And this is other fees. And I don't know if this is like leading up to the case, but this is notifying the justices.
Look at all this. It is all fees that the court has to pay for in order for it to function, to notify other justices, like you're reading, serving warrant on Joseph Smith and travel. Well, the court doesn't do it. It has a sheriff do it, but the sheriff bills for it and the court has to pay for it. So the court has to be reimbursed from somewhere. Subpoenaing 12 witnesses, travel. These are all things that are in preparation for the trial. Okay, 16 miles travel with minimus to take him. So all of these would be incurred in any case. Now, do you have that other one? That other so is there anything in there that says Joseph Smith is the one who has to pay this?
To my fees and examination of the above case, this is the People versus Joseph Smith, the glass looker, misdemeanor. I guess not.
Yeah. It's just kind of weak there.
Yeah.
So, but like I say, that's the least important thing. The most important thing is Joseph Smith admits to it. Second most important thing is that Josiah Stoll said, yes, he fooled me, but I still believe he has the power.
Yeah. So there's that. Now,
Josiah Stoll ends up becoming a Mormon.
Now, what I thought was interesting, this case, we know about it, and we did an episode on it. We did the 1826 glass looker trial. I'll show you the thumbnail to the audience here in a little bit, and you guys can see that. And if you've never heard this case, you'd want to go watch that episode. We go through all the documents, read them, let you make the call on what's all going on there. We also go into detail about the next case we'll talk about, which is the 1830 case, which is very similar. But I do want to know.
That's an exciting thing to me, because I had learned about 1826 and I thought, oh my gosh. And then relatively recently, last few years or so, I learned that there was an 1830 case too that was, like you say, very similar, being brought up on charges relating to his treasure digging, I think. So Dan Vogel says the bills show that 3 justices were to be notified for a trial, which was not held, probably due to off-record deal. Okay. Thank you so much, Dan. Appreciate your insights as always.
The thing that caught my eye on this one, though, has nothing to do with the case itself. It's what Joseph Smith says in his testimony. He says that he had occasionally been in the habit of looking through this stone to find lost property for 3 years. So he admits to being a treasure digger, as you point out. And then he claimed he'd mostly quit because it hurt his eyes. And I remember that we have and I'll show it here in a moment. We have the William Smith statement that the Nephite spectacles were too big.
Oh, yeah.
And they stressed Joseph Smith's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have Charles Anton on 2 occasions, one of them talking to Eber D. Howe, where he informs both in a newspaper article about his involvement with Joseph Smith, as well as his testimony to Eber D. Howe. He mentions how Martin Harris told him that the Nephite spectacles were too big.
Yeah, that's because the Jaredites had unusually large lens grinders.
Yeah. And the story that I was taught by apologists to say was that the reason Smith left the Nephite spectacles and went to the Seer stone was because the Nephite spectacles made his eyes hurt. And that's why he switched instruments.
Yes.
But that makes 0 sense if earlier in the record, Joseph Smith says, hey, I don't do this treasure digging thing anymore because that round egg-shaped rock hurts my eyes.
Well, they both hurt his eyes. I mean, he uses one for a while. It hurts his eyes because it's so big. You know, it's just huge. Can you imagine? And then he has to go to this rock, looking at a rock and a hat all day. It is going to hurt your eyes. How many people look at a computer screen all day and get their eyes hurt? They're reading off a computer exactly the way Joseph Smith was reading off his seer stone.
Yep. One's an iPhone, one's a computer screen. Sure.
How would Joseph Smith have known to claim that it hurt his eyes when he didn't live in an age of computer where everybody knows that it'll hurt your eyes if you read too much on the computer?
That's right. So I went and tracked this down. First, I found where at least the church acknowledges that. This is Joseph Smith's 1826 trial. This is currently on their website. This is in their study/history/topics section. And so you can just go online and type in LDS.org is what I always type in. It still works, but you're supposed to, I guess, type in churchofjesuschrist.org and look up Joseph Smith's 1826 trial. And the church here, the LDS church, currently on its website says, in his testimony, Joseph readily agreed he had used his seer stone off and on to look for lost property. But he had given up the practice. It hurt his eyes, he said. So there's that.
By the way, what this is in criminal terms, what I would call is a half-assed denial. It's the kind of it's the kind of denial a not very smart person does. So they admit to the truth of the accusation, but say, "But I haven't done it recently." It's like that's going to get him off the hook.
It's used the same way with the Nephite spectacles when he's asked, or Orson Pratt or John Whitmer, anybody, whoever else is responding to the charge of why didn't he use the Nephite spectacles anymore? Why is he using a stone? The response somewhere in there is at least talked about with William Smith that the Nephite spectacles hurt his eyes. And so every time he gives something up as far as an instrument, it's an excuse that he falls back to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just note here, this is Charles Anton.
That's why he never gave up polygamy. It didn't hurt his eyes.
It didn't hurt his eyes. It made other things feel good, though. All right.
Friday, Bill.
Charles Anton to E.D. Howe, February 17th, 1834, along with the book, an enormous pair of gold spectacles. These spectacles were so large that if a person...
An enormous pair of what?
Spectacles, not testicles. Yeah. Were so large that if a person attempted to look through them, his two eyes would have to be turned towards one of the glasses merely, the spectacles in question being altogether too large for the breadth of a human face.
And then, you know what Moroni on top of the temple has up under his robe? An enormous pair of gold spectacles. I rest my case.
All right. Charles Anton, E.D. Howe, same thing there. So let's go back here. So this is William Smith. This was an interview he gave to J.W. Peterson and W.S. Pender, 4th of July, 1891. And he describes them. The expression, two stones in the Urim and Thummim being set in two rims of a bow. He said a silver bow ran over one stone and under, and over the one and under, and the first in the shape of a horizontal figure 8, like a pair of spectacles. That they were much too large for Joseph, and he could only see through one at a time, using sometimes one and sometimes the other.
Mm-hmm.
By putting his head in a hat or some dark object, it was not necessary to close one eye while looking through the stone with the other. In that way, sometimes when his eyes grew tired, he relieved them of the strain. And so here is William Smith remarking that the spectacles would also be put into a hat, and he would bury his face. He would look at one side of the spectacles or the other at a time, and these would also hurt his eyes. So,
and that's how we relieve the eyes of the strain.
Yeah, here's a picture of Smith with the Nephite spectacles on.
At least William is remembering at this late date some kind of strain associated with the spectacles that his brother talked about. Those are huge. Those are huge spectacles.
And so I just simply note, using the apologetic argument that Smith left the spectacles behind because they hurt his eyes and he moved to the stone makes no sense now, because now we know that he actually referred to both instruments as straining and hurting his eyes, according to his brother William Smith. And so one isn't better than the other.
This is the point you were making with these quotes. Brilliant.
That is.
So at one point, Joseph Smith said, using the rock in the hat hurts my eyes.
Yep.
And another time he said, using the spectacles that came with the plates hurts my eyes.
Yep.
Apparently. Okay.
And each statement is a way to get away from the instrument, away from its use.
Mm-hmm.
So just note that. Then Fraser's Magazine, and by the way, this case here is probably the one where we go with the most detail into. Fraser's Magazine, that's not the cover of this particular issue. That was just a cover I found online. I couldn't find the cover for this one, but it's the February 1873 edition.
Oh, this is in England?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I got the boxed in paragraph down there on the left, and I made it bigger so we can read it. McMaster sworn says he went with Arid Stoll and likewise came away, disgusted. Prisoner pretended to him that he could discover objects at a distance by holding this white stone. Again, that's the Sally Chase stone that he got by using Sally Chase's green stone to find his first seer stone. And that was in 1819, a year before the first vision. When he was 13 years old, that prisoner rather declined looking into a hat at his dark colored stone, as he said that hurt his eyes. So this is where the church gets that information from. It's from McMaster's testimony in the 1826 trial. He says that Joseph Smith told him that when he puts the white stone in the hat and buries his face into it, it hurts his eyes. And so he doesn't want to use it often and wants to get away from treasure digging.
I don't know. If I were taking a white stone and holding it up to the sun, I think that would end up hurting my eyes more.
More than in a hat, right? Oh,
because I can't hold it steady. I'm going to be getting blinded every other second.
So I thought this was interesting. So here's where the original information comes from. And then you see the church use it because it's helpful to the church's narrative in this instance. So they use it. So there's Joseph Smith with his eyes hurting, holding his seer stone.
It doesn't mention that those two guys walked away disgusted, does it?
It doesn't mention that at all. No.
Yeah. Oversight.
There's that. There's those two documents. And again, if you want to go know the ins and outs, everything from top to bottom on the 1826 trial of Joseph Smith, go watch this episode that RFM and I did for Mormonism Live, the 1826 trial of Joseph Smith, the Glass Looker. And with that, we'll move into the next one. So this is 1830. This is the second case connected to treasure digging. Happens 4 years later. It's also in the same geographic area, Colesville. He has a disorderly persons trial. So shortly after Smith found the Church of Christ, that's what the original LDS church was called, in April 1830, local clergymen and others hostile to the new faith sought to halt his proselytizing. In late June 1830, while Smith was visiting converts in Colesville, New York, he was arrested again under the state's disorderly person statute. The stated case was likely his reputation for glass looking and claims of divine authority that accompanied his new scripture, the Book of Mormon. In truth, this arrest was driven by religious opposition. Individuals who opposed the growth of the church in the area filed the charges, viewing Smith as a charlatan and a threat to the religious status quo. Now, in these descriptions of the cases, sometimes there's a little more faithful language. Sometimes there's a little more critical language. It just depends on sort of where the sources are that these are grabbed from. The charge is being a disorderly person, same statute essentially as in 1826, essentially accusing Smith of fraud. Now, I thought about what this would be like today. And I think about like when someone calls, like a telemarketer calls to try to get information from you. If like phishing kind of stuff, Bernie Madoff to some extent, but Madoff took advantage to such an extreme amount that his case would be maybe unique. But is there a way that maybe you could relate a scam kind of charge in today's parlance with what the glass looking charge of then would be compared to? It's somebody presenting themselves as being something they're not.
Theft by fraud.
Theft by fraud.
Yeah, there are a variety of ways that one can commit theft, and that's one of the ways.
And in today's, again, I know it would depend on what the specifics are, but is there any sort of range of consequences for someone theft by fraud?
It depends upon the amount of money that's taken.
Yeah, and in this instance, I mean, we're probably talking a few $100s in today's money.
Then that's probably a gross misdemeanor. Theft in the third degree.
So there we go. The outcome, Smith underwent 2 back-to-back trials in different jurisdictions. First, he was held before Justice Joseph Chamberlain in South Bainbridge. That was on June 30th of 1830. And then after a 2-day hearing with 2 attorneys defending him, hired by supporter Joseph Knight Sr. And I think it's Knight who lets him take the black horse when he goes to get the plates with Emma.
Yes.
In 1827. So Smith was acquitted on July 1st. Immediately upon this acquittal, a constable from neighboring Broome County rearrested him on the same charge. Smith was transported to Colesville, where a second trial convened before a court of special sessions. This court also acquitted him of disorderly conduct. The rapid rearrest, despite the first acquittal, shows how determined his enemies were, effectively engaged in forum shopping, trying to lock up the Mormon prophet. Nevertheless, both courts found no cause to convict. Smith's release marked I'm going to get rid of those comments again, marked a legal victory for him and his fledgling church, although it was also set a pattern of frequent legal run-ins. Your thoughts on the 1830 trial? Because I think you're going to say the same thing as 26, which is it doesn't really matter that the acquittal happens. All the testimony says that he was actually doing the thing he's charged with doing.
Well, right. And here he started a new religion, and so people are getting anxious. And I think that this is probably one of the main reasons that he ended up leaving New York, because he could see an unending future of this kind of abuse of the legal system. So it was good for him to get out of the state, and the opportunity presented itself in a providential way, if I may use that expression, to go to Kirtland, Ohio. I will say that back in the 80s, they had this film. The church produced a film about Joseph Smith, and I can't remember what it was called at the time. It seems like they've had a series of these types of films with all having these different titles, but they're so similar that I can't keep them straight in my mind. I don't know if it was Legacy or whatever, but it had this scene where they have blocked up a stream, just a small stream. They blocked it up to create enough water to baptize people in, and that's what the Mormons are down there doing when the posse comes riding up and arrests Joseph for this incident. This is what he was being arrested for.
Somebody here says Stoll was not a victim since he testified for Smith. And I just want to throw a story out and get your thoughts. When I worked at the pawn shop, I, on more than one occasion, had people come in to do a loan and something was off. When you're in that business, you get really good at reading body language and sensing that something isn't right.
Yeah.
And so to sort of slow things down, ask lots of questions, try to figure out what it is that's happening. More than one occasion, I had a person come in who was convinced that they had a boyfriend or girlfriend in another country that they had a relationship with for 3 or 4 months, had not met them at all.
Mm-hmm.
But that the romance between them had grown considerably.
They're not coming in to get a ring, I hope.
No, and now they need a loan because their boyfriend or girlfriend is in dire straits over in India, over in wherever. And so they come in to pawn things that are sentimental to them, valuable to them, sometimes gold coins or whatever. And they wanted to borrow money to send over to their boyfriend or girlfriend that they've never met.
Yes.
And you can tell, you ask enough questions, you know what's going on here. It's a scam and the relationship isn't real. Mm-mm. But that person, you'll be damned if you can talk them out of it.
Right.
They are dead set that this relationship is real, this person, because they're so desperate for that romantic human connection that they see this person as being their boyfriend or girlfriend no matter what happens Meanwhile, the person is not that name, maybe not that gender, and they're in some other country trying to get money, and they're doing it to 100 people all at the same time. And that person is still a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do want to see what your thoughts are. That's my perspective. A victim doesn't need to know they're a victim.
Oh, well, I mean, this is a situation which plays itself out all the time in the courts. And what it is you've got probably a member of the family, somebody who knows and cares about this guy, or at least cares about his money. And if it's a nephew or a brother-in-law or whatever, so much the better. There are conflicting accounts of who it was, and nothing really solid as far as documents go as to who brought the charge. So that's why we're talking about this. But if it were a member of his family, then what you're concerned about is you've got an older member of your family who's starting to lose his faculties. He's making unwise decisions from time to time. He's not as sharp as he used to be. And lo and behold, now he's paying this young fellow to go search for Spanish silver mines on his property. And to Stowell, that all sounded fine and great. Yeah, absolutely. And even though, I mean, the fact that Joseph Smith didn't produce any treasure in multiple treasure digs, and yet have Josiah Stowell show up at his trial and testify on his behalf and say that, admit that he never found anything, but still swear that he has the power to find treasure. This person who filed the suit on behalf of Josiah Stowell may have known something about his mental faculties, which we can see being reflected in other areas. So maybe he wasn't as sharp as he used to be. All I'm saying is, without getting into what is the truth from God's point of view, it's reasonable to think that a non-member person who doesn't believe Joseph Smith has the power to find treasure would think that their elderly and maybe approaching senile relative is being taken advantage of by him, and talk to Josiah Stowell about it, to his uncle, to his whatever it is. Talk to him about it. He won't be convinced. What can I do? What can I do? I'll file a lawsuit.
Yeah, and Stowell was born in 1770.
Okay, so 3060. That's easy.
So he would be 60.
Or 6056 in 1826.
And I guess what I'm asking you, though, is does a person need to sense that they are a victim for the courts to see them as a victim?
No.
No. Someone can be a victim even if they continue to believe the ruse.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. I just wanted to note that. Okay, perfect. So there's an image of Smith before the judge in 1830, swearing he'll tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We move on to the 1835 assault on Calvin Stoddard.
I don't even know who Calvin Stoddard is.
Yeah, he is the brother-in-law of Joseph Smith. He is the husband of Sister Sophronia. In April 1835 in Kirtland, Ohio, Joseph Smith got into a physical altercation with his brother-in-law, Calvin Stoddard. The dispute reportedly began over a trivial matter, an argument about whether a certain piece of land had a water source. Sounds like some water divination here.
Or property sales.
Tensions flared, and eyewitnesses later testified that Smith knocked Stoddard down. By the way, this will become a common theme throughout tonight, that Smith has a propensity to assault people. And it won't happen once, it won't happen twice, it won't happen 3 times. It'll happen at least 4 times.
4, really? Wow.
Yep. Tensions flared, and eyewitnesses later testified that Smith knocked Stoddard down during the quarrel. Some accounts say Stoddard threatened Joseph with a cane, which Stoddard denied, but all agree Joseph struck him at least once. Importantly, after the scuffle, Joseph quickly apologized and asked Stoddard's forgiveness, which Stoddard granted. The 2 men seemingly reconciled. However, news of the fight gave an opportunity to Joseph's enemies. The charge.
So if Stoddard grants the request for forgiveness, who brings the lawsuit?
Grandison Newell. And if you'll remember that name, that's who the death threats are against when it comes to the Kirtland Safety Society Bank criminal case that we spoke about in that episode. Grandison Newell. So he is involved here as well. and he's the one who brings the charge. Newell was a bitter opponent of Smith and had been looking for ways to entangle him legally, and he does so in other instances, as we just talked about. Claiming to have witnessed the incident, Newell filed a complaint with Justice Lewis Miller in Painesville, Ohio, accusing Joseph Smith of assault. The warrant was issued for Smith's arrest on the 21st of April, 1835. And then the outcome, Smith was arrested and underwent preliminary hearing before Justice Miller on April 22nd, 1835. The evidence, including conflicting witness testimonies, was reviewed. The case was bound over for trial at the Geauga County Court of Common Pleas, which convened in June of 35. At trial, the judge or jury acquitted Joseph Smith of the assault and battery charge.
Yes.
Yep. The reconciliation between Smith and Stoddard likely helped, with the victim unwilling to support prosecution. It was apparent that the charge had been pushed by Newell for spite. Anything you want to say about this from a legal point of view, or your opinion otherwise?
Just that it is an interesting insight into how the courts functioned, at least in lesser populated areas back in the 1830s in the USA, because you've got citizens who swear out complaints, criminal complaints against other citizens. You don't even have to be the victim. You don't have to even allege that you have suffered any harm. In other words, you don't even have to have freaking standing to swear out a complaint against somebody else. Grandison Newell had no standing to swear out a complaint. In other words, standing means that you're impacted by this in some way, right? That you have a reason, a basis, that you've got some cause to plead. He has no cause to plead. He's just saying, well, I saw this guy beat up this guy, and so this guy should be arrested and charged.
Yeah, and I think this is a nothing. They got into, him and his brother-in-law got into an argument. He pushed his brother-in-law down, asked for forgiveness. He forgave him, and neither of them pursued it any further. It's only a third party. So this seems like just a nothing. But I will note, there's no argument here that Smith hit him. That when Joseph Smith,
that he did not hit him.
No, there's no argument here that Smith did hit him.
Okay,
and it's agreed by all witnesses and components of this charge.
Oh, right. But some have it as self-defense because of the cane that some say that Stoddard had.
Yeah. But he did hit him. And you'll see that happen over and over and over again here. So here's a picture of Smith knocking his brother-in-law down. We can find this case. This was another interesting thing. And this will be hard to read because it's as small as it is, but it takes up so much. So I'm going to pause this here. I'm going to make this big for just a moment. Let me get rid of that other. I'll just leave it up here for a minute. You can push pause. You can read all of this, but this is the case. I'll just note there in the third column towards the bottom, cross-examination, had a cane, did not attempt to strike him or threaten. William Smith examined, saw Stoddard come along, cursing and swearing. Joseph went out. Stoddard said he would whip him and drew his cane upon Joseph. Joseph backed the cane off and struck Stoddard with a flat hand. Stoddard fell down. Joseph struck him once.
Or twice.
Once or twice, yep. Joseph stopped in the yard. They were close together when he saw them, cautioned Joseph to stop, that he had done enough. So it sounds like he had lifted the cane like he was going to hit him, hadn't quite hit him yet, and Smith proceeded to hit him once or twice. So there's that. And you can pause that and read the whole thing, but that's
what Joseph's brother said.
Yep. And again, if Joseph's brother's saying it and it doesn't look the best for Joseph, then of course William Smith and Joseph didn't always get along. But if it's his brother testifying of this, of course, it's also his brother-in-law. I guess it's not. Never mind. So anyway, I was going to say it's his brother-in-law as well, but it's not, because it's not.
It is.
Oh, it is.
Wait, well, Sophrony is William Smith's sister as well as Joseph, right?
Anyway, I'm getting stuck because sometimes you can have a brother-in-law that's not your brother's brother-in-law. But anyway, in this instance, it is. This is in the Painesville Township, Geauga County, Ohio. This is the Painesville Telegraph, 26 June, 1835, if you want to go look that up.
I am very impressed with your pronunciation of that county. Do you know, I made a special point when I was going through the slides today of looking it up and doing the pronunciation thing and thinking, okay, I've got to remember how to say the county right.
Oh, this is where Geauga Lake was. So Geauga County, Ohio is where the amusement park Geauga Lake was, which was next door to SeaWorld. And I'm from Ohio.
They had SeaWorld in Ohio?
Yeah, they had a SeaWorld in Ohio
You're
at one
pulling
time.
my leg.
No, they had a SeaWorld in Ohio at one time. And they had a Geauga Lake. And I'd been to both of them. And they're no longer there, I don't think. And I think Six Flags, which owns Cedar Point, bought up Geauga Lake. And I'm not sure either park is there anymore. I know SeaWorld's not there. But see if you can find it. You're looking it up. See if you can find it. Geauga Lake.
That's actually
amusement
not actually
park
even what I'm looking for.
and SeaWorld in
I was
Ohio.
looking for something else. What do you want me to look for?
Well, you can just look up Geauga Lake and SeaWorld and when they were in Ohio and when they left. But it's only because I grew up in Ohio that I know that. So anyway.
SeaWorld, Ohio. It has its own Wikipedia page. This sounds like such a bad idea. I don't know why. It was a theme park and marine zoological park. Aurora, Ohio.
Yep.
Blah, 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 blah. It was converted to a water park known as Wildwater Kingdom, which occupied the property until its closure in September of 2016. So it was SeaWorld Cleveland from 1970 to 2000. Wow. Okay.
There you go. All right.
SeaWorld Cleveland.
Anything else you want to say about the Stoddard case?
No, not at all. Thank you.
Here we go. So 1836, an assault on a visiting minister. Here we go. Another physical hands-on abuse case.
He was probably knocking on Joseph Smith's door, asking if he wanted to know the truth that leads to eternal life.
Yeah. When I first saw this RFM, I thought this was going to be Joshua, the Jewish minister.
Yeah.
Because they got into the back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. It's an unnamed minister. So we'll see here. In the fall of 1836, a Christian minister, an acquaintance from Joseph's New York days, visited Smith at his home in Kirtland, Ohio. At some point during the visit, their conversation soured.
They shouldn't talk about religion, my mom always said.
It says possibly over, but who knows? Of
course it's religion. It's a minister.
You get second and third hand witnesses talking about it. But Joseph Smith physically attacked the clergyman. Contemporary details are sparse, but Smith later frankly admitted he whipped the visiting minister. The startled guest left and went straight to the magistrate to swear out an assault and battery complaint.
What a sore loser.
In response, one of Joseph's allies, Constable Luke Johnson, and you might remember Luke Johnson from the John Johnson farm. He's one of the Johnson boys.
Luke and Lyman.
Yep. Constable Luke Johnson, who was also Joseph's brother-in-law.
He's got a lot of brother-in-laws.
That's because, well, that might be inaccurate.
Or brothers-in-law.
That might be inaccurate because that might be based on the old Miranda Hyde being the Johnson's sister, that reason that he was tarred and feathered. That might go to that. So I don't want to say that. That's what the source said, but that may not be true. Obtained a warrant of his own against the minister, perhaps for trespassing or countersuit. This intimidation worked. Confronted with the proposal of legal trouble himself, the minister fled Kirtland and left the county rather than pursue the charge.
That sounds like what Tim Ballard does.
So assault and battery filed by the minister. However, the case never reached court. The minister's complaint was effectively nullified when he fled town to avoid Luke Johnson's retaliatory warrant. And I'll just say here, Smith does this over and over again. He has his friends in positions of authority, and he's able to utilize that to give him the strongest strength in edge in any of these cases.
Yes, but on the other hand, the guilty flee when no one pursueth. Why doesn't the minister just want to stand his ground and have the trial?
Yeah.
I think that the minister didn't have completely clean hands either, maybe.
So the outcome, no formal trial. Joseph Smith was never prosecuted. The accuser dropped out. In fact, by January 1843, Smith felt emboldened enough to publicly brag about this incident. He told friends how he whipped him till he begged. And that when the minister threatened to sue, Joseph sent Luke Johnson, the constable, after him, and he run him out of the county. The affair ended up with the minister gone and Smith facing no legal consequences. While it didn't become an official court battle, this episode shows Smith's willingness to use force and influence over local law enforcement to his advantage, and he demonstrates the de facto protection he enjoyed in Kirtland, where friendly officials could thwart outside complaints. I'll just note here, there's no denying this assault happened either. Joseph Smith himself admitted that he whipped the minister until he begged him to stop. So that's one. You've got Calvin Stoddard is number 2. And so those are 2 so far of him laying hands on somebody.
Maybe not both brothers-in-law.
No, and here is
holy smokes, it's another minister. Oh, that is the minister.
That's Smith beating up the minister.
He looks like he's begging.
Yeah, he is. He's begging. He whipped him. Anything you want to say about that case?
No.
Okay.
No. But here we go into, of course, the Kirtland, all the lawsuits this scam engendered.
Yeah, we did an episode on this as well.
Yes.
And the next 2 cases, this one and the one that follows, are wrapped around the Kirtland Safety Society Bank. We went into great detail in that episode about how Smith had informed people that there were spiritual blessings for giving money to the bank, that it was going to succeed. They also had been dishonest about the amount of backing money that the bank had. And Smith got out when the getting was good. Others took the fall. And Smith
could be president now.
Yeah, and Smith ended up being, you be president now.
I've had enough. Yeah. Your turn.
So I won't read all of this, but it just says that Smith and church leaders in Ohio, Kirtland Safety Society was an unlicensed banking company. They printed banknotes to serve as currency. If you remember, in really small letters, they wrote anti and company after banking in order to make it so that those notes were anti-banking notes, but it was so small that nobody would have seen that unless they took the time to look at it. This led to public outcry and lawsuits. February 1837, outraged creditor Samuel D. Round swore out a warrant against Smith and Rigdon for illegal banking. The charge was operating an illegal bank and issuing unapproved bank notes. They were violating Ohio banking laws and defrauding the public by printing money without authority.
Mm-hmm. And the usual apologetic response to this is that other people were doing it too.
And this is where we get to the part where the church on one hand and all of its apologists want to say Joseph was never found guilty. And the reality is that in many of these cases, they just leave town or something else happens and they're able to get some distance away from things.
Well, if you're convicted, even in absentia, you're still convicted, aren't you?
Yeah, but you'll see how this, so in the preliminary hearing, March 24th, 1837, judge found enough evidence to bind the case over for trial. By October 1837, Smith and Rigdon had fled Kirtland amid rising hostility and a slew of lawsuits. They temporarily went to hide in Upper Canada. In their absence, the Ohio court proceeded with the trial in absentia, just as you noted. Smith and Rigdon were each convicted and fined $1,000. Again, the apologetic story is Joseph Smith was never convicted of any crime.
So that's incorrect.
That's incorrect. A huge sum
was convicted
for violating bank statutes. By then, however, they were no longer in Ohio to pay or be jailed. The Kirtland banking scandal marked a turning point. From 1837 to 1838, Joseph faced 7 separate arrests within 4 months, a mix of criminal charges and civil suits. Kirtland citizens turned against him. His followers managed to raise over $38,000 in bail money to keep him out of jail during the onslaught.
That sounds like a remarkably high amount of money.
Yeah. Ultimately, January 12th, 1838, with a new warrant issued for banking fraud, Smith and Rigdon decided to abandon Kirtland altogether. They fled Ohio in the dead of night, escaping into Missouri to avoid arrest. In doing so, Joseph effectively jumped bail and became a fugitive from Ohio justice. The banking fraud charges remained unresolved as Smith never returned to Ohio, an implicit admission that remaining risked imprisonment. And I just want to check the chat. I'm just checking to see if like Dan Vogel's putting any comments in. I don't see anything there. Diane, would love to know any thoughts you've got on any of this as well.
At least the government's got $38,000.
Yeah. So bank fraud. There's the episode we did. Tons of information in that episode. I think we lay out the Kirtland Safety Society
Yes.
bank situation in the church in that time period, as well as it's been done. I would highly suggest folks go and watch that. Anything you want to say about that particular case?
No, we've just done so much on it, but you have to include it. I mean, when you're doing a list like these,
Yeah,
the list is enormous. It continues. It goes on and on. It doesn't even stop in 1844. Okay, no, I'm kidding. It does stop in 1844.
it actually does. Well, it doesn't. There were things about the estate that had other charges to try to gather money in. So
there you go. You're right.
The 1837 conspiracy to murder Grandison Newell. Again, we mentioned Grandison earlier. He's the one who brought the charge up with Calvin Stoddard. Grandison Newell accused Joseph Smith of conspiring to murder him. Conspiracy to murder. This was an extremely serious allegation, obviously, that Smith had solicited or encouraged the murder of an enemy. It stemmed from affidavits from Denton and Davis. We'll get to them in just a second. But more importantly, the testimony of Mormon leader Orson Hyde. And this is what convinces me that there's truth to this story.
I think Orson gives a very Joseph-friendly account.
He does not.
Well, let's see.
Yeah, we will. So I'll just note the outcome of this is that it starts off moving towards trial. The grand jury finds cause for trial, but then the trial itself ends up ending with Joseph Smith not being convicted, he being essentially found innocent. They dismissed the charge. Let's see here. The case did not go to trial. Dismissing a charge like conspiracy to murder suggests the evidence, while provocative, was legally insufficient or unreliable. And so I know the apologists will note that, and I'll grant that. The case doesn't end that way.
Here's the reason, okay? And you go ahead and go through the evidence, but here's what I'm going to ask you to ask yourself. Like the missionary asked me to keep this question in mind while I was reading the Book of Mormon. Could any man have written this book? I'm going to ask you in the audience while you're reading through these details, where the hell is the attempt to murder anybody? That's the question. And that's what the judge is dealing with, I think.
Right. But what happens is that Solomon Denton and Marvel Davis, who are friends of William Smith, they're the ones who are brought in by Smith to go murder Grandison Newell. And rather than go murder him, they go out into the public and say, hey, Joseph asked us to murder this guy, and we're not going to do that.
Technically, I think the evidence was that they agreed to murder him in the first instance, and then they borrowed pistols from Oliver Cowdery, and then they went on their way to another location, which I'm not sure where it is in relation to everything else. But on the way then, Joseph Smith says, hey, boys, I know where you're going. I know what you're going to do. God go with you. This is a good thing. You will not be held accountable. I'll take it upon myself.
Well, we can see here, Grandison.
But when did they attempt to murder him is the question, I think.
Yeah. And I think the actual act of trying to do that never happens. And as you point out, that may be where the case sort of falls flat on its face. I'll just note here, the most revealing testimony, this is in the Joseph Smith Papers Project. This is a historical introduction to this historical moment. The most revealing testimonies came from Orson Hyde and Solomon Denton. According to the Telegraph's account, Orson Hyde, who's a faithful, believing, higher-up leader, apostle in the church, testifies that in early 1837, he had a conversation with Joseph Smith and others about the threat of litigation against the officers of the Kirtland Safety Society.
By the way, one other thing that I didn't realize, and it goofed me up as I was reading this bill, is that the charge happens in 1837. The allegation is that this attempt occurred 2 years earlier in 1835.
Correct. The same year of the Calvin Stoddard incident. Yes. So according to Hyde, Joseph Smith stated that Newell, Grandison Newell, was the only person who might bring such an action. Hyde further claimed that Joseph Smith said that Newell should be put out of the way or where the crows could not find him. Hyde claimed that Joseph Smith declared that such an action would be justified in the sight of God. Denton, former Latter-day Saint who had been excommunicated from the church around April of 37, testified that in April or May of 1835, he and Mr. Davis, Marvel Davis, presumably, Marvel Davis, it says there, had discussed assassinating Newell. Denton recounted borrowing pistols and having a conversation with Joseph Smith, which he claimed Joseph Smith encouraged him to kill Newell. Now, if you remember, RFM, Smith talks to Denton, just the two of them alone, tells Denton to go kill Grandison Newell. Then Denton goes and gets Marvel Davis and says, hey, Joseph Smith said we're going to go do this. So there's really only one witness who can say that Joseph Smith talked directly about carrying out the murder. The only other thing you have is Orson Hyde saying, well, Smith did talk about killing the guy. He just never gave the order to do so. He just said it would be quite convenient if it happened.
Yeah. And that's enough to get to a jury.
But in this podcast of public opinion in 2025, Denton and Orson Hyde both are communicating essentially the same fact. And while we only have one person who Smith says talked to him and arranged to have this murder take place, Orson Hyde's testimonies, to me, adds enough weight to the story to grant that more than likely Smith made a threat on the life of Grandison Newell.
Well, Orson Hyde, correct me if I'm wrong, because you have it in another slide. Orson Hyde says that after Joseph Smith said this stuff, because he was so mad about this Grandison Newell guy, that he saw Denton, he saw Davis heading out to kill this guy, and Joseph Smith went over to him and talked him out of it. That was Hyde's testimony. That's why I said it was favorable. It was Smith friendly.
Yeah. So Smith gives the order for it to happen. Smith talks to Hyde about doing it, and then has regret at some point, according to this, and tells everybody to back off the plan. And so there's that. But anyway, interesting. You can go back and watch or listen to that episode on the Kirtland Safety Society Bank. And we spend a lot of time talking about this story during that episode. So no need to do that necessarily here. Any other thoughts from you on this incident?
No, I think I've remembered it correctly. I reviewed it just this morning, so I hope I did.
Sweet. All right. The 1838 banking fraud warrant in flight from Ohio. January 1838, Kirtland Safety Society fiasco had resulted in an arrest warrant for Joseph Smith in Rigdon. This is another charge of banking fraud, likely encompassed charges of operating a legal bank again, fraudulently issuing paper money, and perhaps defaulting on financial obligations.
Yeah, they're borrowing money to try and fund their bank, and they're not paying. They have all these creditors who are after them because they want their money.
So January 12th, 1838, a warrant's issued. Rather than submit to arrest, we already talked about this, they flee Ohio, and that gets them out of this. Dan is saying something here. I can't remember what I wrote on the display of money.
Display, I think he means.
But it's possible because the bank was mostly financed on property rather than specie, which is why it failed. So there's that. Okay. Thank you, Dan. So there's bank fraud. There's a wanted poster for Joseph Smith. That's not real. That's just AI generated.
$500 reward. That was in the last thing, right?
This is to do with the one we just talked about, but this is not a real wanted poster. This is just AI created.
Yeah.
All of the images.
It looked like that.
Mm-hmm. 1838, intimidation of Judge Adam Black. Mm. So soon after settling in Northwest Missouri, 1838, Joseph Smith became entangled in local skirmishes that led to the Mormon War later that year. In August 1838, tensions flared between Mormon settlers and Old Missourians in Daviess County, notably a brawl on Gallatin's election day. A few days later, Joseph Smith led an armed contingent of over 100 Mormon men to the house of Justice of the Peace, Adam Black, on August 8th, 1838. Joseph believed Black had been part of a mob or was conspiring against the saints. Smith wanted assurance of neutrality, confronting Black at gunpoint. That's pretty serious. Joseph demanded the judge sign a pledge promising not to harass Mormons.
That would be legally binding.
Yeah, Black at gunpoint, Black, feeling threatened by this militia visit, later swore out a complaint. On August 10th, 1838, Judge Austin A. King issued a warrant for the arrest of Joseph Smith and Lyman White on charges of threatening a public official, essentially mob intimidation of Justice Black, threats and assault on a public officer. This included the use of armed force to coerce a judge. That's a pretty grave offense. Affidavits by witnesses like William Peniston corroborated that Smith's band encircled Black's home and coerced him into signing a document.
You know, if we hadn't just gone over the Kirtland Bank scandal again, which was so ill-conceived and so poorly executed, it would make it almost impossible to believe that somebody would do something that's stupid as take a judge at gunpoint, force him to sign something saying, you're not going to harass us, are you? And then think that's going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to believe that somebody would be that stupid, but then we're talking about the people who brought you the Kirtland Bank scandal.
There's also a certain amount of pompous arrogance in thinking you can intimidate people. It's a stupid act anyway, as you point out, but it's also, it's an emboldened act that is, you're going to sooner or later pay the price for those kinds of actions.
I know things were very hot. I understand that the problem in Gallatin on election day was that the non-Mormons would not allow the Mormons to vote. So there were a lot of things that were going on. People were getting very, very excited. Obviously, it boiled over into the Mormon War. But this is the kind of stuff that caused it.
The outcome here, Sheriff William Morgan of Daviess County attempted to serve the arrest warrant later in August. He found Lyman White guarded by 100 armed men who declared they would not be taken alive and defied the law's authority. Joseph Smith.
This is the kind of thing that gets the National Guard called out on you. Yeah. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the Bundys and not wanting to get off the land and the U.S. government having to go in, and one of them ends up getting killed.
At some point, I mean, there's only so many options the government has when you do things like this.
Yep. Joseph Smith initially refused to submit to arrest or go back to Daviess County, citing, not unreasonably, that he feared the mob violence there. Eventually, a compromise of sorts was arranged. A hearing was set for September 7th, 1838, before Judge Austin King. At that hearing, witnesses, including Judge Black himself on August 28th, gave testimony for and against Smith. Judge King found sufficient evidence to bind the case over.
He's going to believe his brother judge.
To a grand jury for a potential indictment. Joseph Smith was released on $500 bail pending the grand jury's action. However, events overtook the legal process. The small-scale conflict with Adam Black was a precursor to the larger 1838 Mormon War that erupted in the fall. By the time the grand jury would have convened, full armed hostilities had broken out between the Mormon and Missouri state militia. Thus, no trial on Black intimidation happened separately. Instead, it merged into the wider legal crackdown on Mormon leaders. Ultimately, after the Mormon War, Missouri authorities rolled this allegation into the broader treason cases against Smith. And once Smith escaped Missouri in 1839, the charge over Black's incident was effectively abandoned. In summary, Joseph never stood trial solely for the Adam Black episode. It was superseded by the war and treason proceedings. And again, he left the state. And again, you have the church and its apologists going, well, he was never convicted.
It's amazing that one person, Joseph Smith, can get charged with treason in so many states in so little time.
Yeah.
By which I mean two, but still, come on. Missouri and Illinois. Are you kidding me? He gets charged with treason, escapes to Illinois, and now he's going to do the same thing again? Yes.
Yeah. And he also leaves Ohio too. And he also leaves New York. And he also leaves Colesville. He also leaves
Oh,
Harmony,
right, Ohio.
Pennsylvania.
I think the only thing he didn't get charged with in Ohio was treason.
Yeah, he got lots of other charges. The point is, this guy gets in trouble and he just leaves the state every time.
Mhm.
By the way, that's what grifters do. That's what grifters do. They keep moving. All right, so here's Smith with one of his henchmen holding
Lyman White, I bet.
the Judge Adam Black, asking him to sign something. So there's that one. 1838, 1839, the Mormon War and treason charges in Missouri. This is I'm not even going to go into this one. This is just what the intimidation of Judge Adam Black was then rolled into the larger charges for treason.
Mhm.
We've already talked about enough of that you understand what's going on there. Anything you want to say about that case? Otherwise, I'll move on.
A remarkable period in United States history.
Yeah. And again, he was being charged with, he was indicted for treason, arson, burglary, robbery, and murder.
He's calling out armed troops against the state government. It's the definition of treason.
Yeah. So there's that. Okay. Outcome we already know because we talked about it in the last one.
Which is why he got charged with treason in Illinois.
Yeah.
And that was the last thing he got arrested on and what he was being held on when he was assassinated.
And when we hear the story, when we believing Mormons, when I was a believing Mormon, we hear the story about Liberty Jail. What we're told is that there's these false charges and they're held for so long. And then once you understand what was going on, that Joseph Smith is leading the Mormons against the state against the government and state militia, and it's no wonder they threw him in the pokey for 6 months.
It's amazing they didn't shoot him summarily at a firing squad or hang him.
He's also fled 2 other states because of charges there. They don't want him leaving this state. It's no wonder he's held in Liberty Jail for 6 months.
Well, the course of the Lord is one eternal round. What happened in New York happened in Ohio. What happened in Ohio happened in Missouri. And what happened in Missouri happened in Illinois.
Yeah. So once you understand the background, you can understand why the court said no bail. We're putting you in the slammer. You're going to stay in jail until we get this all sorted out. So there's that. 1841, Illinois arrests and extradition attempt. So after the Missouri debacle, Joseph Smith resettled in Nauvoo. It says resettled, but maybe he left and came back. But resettled in Nauvoo, Illinois, on the Missouri River, 1839. He lived openly, believing himself safe under Illinois law. However, Missouri had not forgotten the 1838 charges. In 1841, Missouri's governor, Thomas Reynolds, formally requested that Illinois extradite Joseph Smith to face the Missouri indictments for treason and other crimes from the Mormon War. On June 5th, 41, acting on this request, Illinois authorities arrested Smith in Nauvoo as a fugitive from justice. This is America's most wanted here. Fugitive from justice. From Missouri, Joseph was taken into custody under the interstate extradition warrant, which alleged that he had fled Missouri after committing treason and other felonies there.
Have you ever heard of Dog the Bounty Hunter?
Yes.
I think that's the one that got Joseph this time.
Yeah. There are certain people who are crossing state lines to try to get Joseph Smith to be accountable to what he's done in other places. Being a fugitive from Missouri, facing charges of treason, arson, etc., murder, robbery, all the things we named. Effectively, the warrant treated him as an escaped prisoner from Missouri's justice. This wasn't a new criminal charge in Illinois courts, but an extradition proceeding to hand him back to Missouri to stand trial for the 1838 crimes.
Which tells me that if the story that's floated about is true, that Joseph Smith was let go while being transported from point A to point B with the agreement and tacit instruction of the governor, right?
That's the story we tell, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Then there would be no reason to continue to pursue him and try and extradite him back to Missouri to face the charges from which he had escaped. The only other option is, it is a new governor. Okay, Boggs is no longer the governor. Now you've got this other guy in there, right? Was it
Why,
Reynolds? What was his name?
why would Boggs be lenient when these guys tried to kill him? At least he thinks that.
Because that hasn't happened yet.
Oh, that's right. That comes next. All right.
Spoiler alert.
Missouri's new governor is Thomas Reynolds.
Yeah, Reynolds.
The
So that's the only other option. But what on its face, it makes it look like he really escaped.
Yeah, it looks like he escaped and nobody let him go.
Right.
But you know, when you escape, when you come back to your new place and you're meeting with your followers, you go, yeah, they let me go. I was so nice and I said all these spiritual things and, you know, I'm a prophet and all, so they let me go. The outcome here, Joseph Smith immediately sought legal relief through a writ of habeas corpus. Would you explain to the audience what habeas corpus is?
Habeas corpus means produce the body. And I will tell you, I'm not exactly familiar with the creative way in which it was used in Nauvoo. It's usually something that means produce the body of the prisoner, so, you know, so that you don't languish in obscurity in jail, right? So you have a hearing in front of somebody and they know what's going on and hopefully something happens with your case. That's my understanding of habeas corpus. This is a bit of a different use of it. So Joseph Smith immediately sought legal relief through a writ of habeas corpus in Illinois courts, right? I mean, you see, today, if California, okay, issues an arrest warrant for somebody and they're up in Washington or any other state and they get arrested on that warrant, okay, then there's only two things that they can do to fight that warrant. Maybe it's one thing. It's only one thing. The one thing is, the only thing you do is contest that you're not the person that the warrant is seeking. If you can do that successfully, I've never heard of it happening, but if you can do that successfully, then you can be released, right? But when it comes to the underlying criminal case on which you're being arrested, whether it's pending or done or whatever, the arresting state is not the place where you litigate that. That's California's concern. Okay. So when it talks about using habeas process in Illinois court to examine the charge, which is a lot of this is what they're doing. They're examining the underlying charge, which today would be improper, I would think. At least my experience would be. There'd be like Washington examining California's underlying charge against Joseph Smith, who's been arrested in Washington, and saying, nah, this is no good. And so you got to go free. No, you have to go back, and California deals with that. But these are different times. The past is a foreign country, I hear.
Yeah, they do things differently there. This was interesting. So Joseph Smith immediately sought legal relief through a writ of habeas corpus in Illinois courts on June 10th, 1841. His case was heard before Judge Stephen A. Douglas. Yes, that Stephen A. Douglas, the man who not only contested Abraham Lincoln for his bride, they both were dating Mary Todd, and she was interested in both of them.
Wow.
Did you know that, RFM?
A little polyandry going on there.
Well, not only at the same time. She dated Douglas first, then she dated Lincoln. She ends up marrying Lincoln, and she married the winner because Douglas ran against Lincoln and lost.
Well, that's the long and the short of it between Lincoln and Douglas.
So Smith meets Judge Stephen Douglas in the Illinois Circuit Court in Monmouth, Illinois. After reviewing the extradition papers, Judge Douglas discharged Joseph Smith and set him free. The release was based on technicalities. Douglas ruled that the Missouri warrant was defective and invalid.
Okay.
One issue was that the extradition documents did not properly prove that Smith was actually a fugitive. They needed to show that he was physically in Missouri when the alleged crimes occurred and fled. Something tricky in the treason charge, since Joseph had been in custody when he fled. In short, Illinois law required strict form on such warrants, and Douglas found Missouri's paperwork wanting. So he let Smith go. Joseph Smith returned to Nauvoo triumphantly, having foiled Missouri's first attempt to drag him back. Can you imagine Smith gets back into town and tells everybody, I'm so right on this stuff that even this guy let me go. You know, he does. Joseph Smith does find a way to get away from these things in a way that I don't think I could ever do. So good on him.
He had the luck of the Irish.
There's Joseph Smith talking to Stephen Douglas and pleading his case before him.
I think Stephen Douglas is standing on several phone books.
Yeah, he's a little bit shorter of a man. Yes. I think it's one of the things Mary Todd Lincoln wasn't really attracted to. All right. 1842, accusation of plotting to kill ex-governor Boggs. On the 6th of May, 1842, former Missouri Governor Lilburn W. Boggs, the very official who had ordered the expulsion of the Mormons. By the way, when he issues the extermination order, Mormons tell that story as if what's being said is exterminate, as in genocide, kill, murder these people and get rid of them as a people entirely. When in the parlance of the day, an extermination order meant that they had to leave the state. It didn't mean to go kill them. Now, I also grant that enemies of the church would have seen it or could have interpreted it as permission to pick up arms. And that could have happened.
When I first heard the story from the missionaries who taught me the discussions, back in the late 70s, I was overwhelmed that such an injustice of religious rights could occur in the United States of America. And it never occurred to me to ask the obvious question, which is, wow, so what did the Mormons do to cause this to happen?
Yeah. And now you know what the Mormons did to cause this to happen. It was an insurrection of a group of religious zealots rising up against the local government and militia.
And having battles like at Crooked Creek.
Yeah.
Crooked River, excuse me.
Crooked River. All right. So let's see here. The very official who had ordered the expulsion of the Mormons was shot in the head and neck at his home in Independence, Missouri. Miraculously, Boggs survived the assassination attempt. Suspicion quickly fell on Joseph Smith and his inner circle.
Imagine if Boggs had been a Mormon. That would have been a miracle. He would have been protected by angels.
Yep. Given Boggs' history with the Saints, one of Joseph's close associates, Orrin Porter Rockwell, yes, that Orrin Porter Rockwell, had been in Missouri that spring, and rumors swirled that he was the gunman sent by Joseph. Boggs himself swore an affidavit accusing Joseph Smith of being an accessory before the fact in the attempted murder, essentially that Joseph had ordered or encouraged Boggs' assassination. Missouri Governor Reynolds forwarded a request to Illinois for Smith's extradition on this new charge. In 1842, Illinois Governor Thomas Carlin issued a warrant for Joseph Smith's arrest.
Okay, hang on there. How the hell do you get a warrant issued for an arrest of anybody on this nothing charge?
Yeah.
They don't have enough to charge Porter Rockwell.
No, all you have is
speculation.
All you have is Rockwell in town. That's all you have.
Yes, and even when they try him, he gets acquitted in Missouri, for crying out loud.
All he has to do is keep his story straight. They've got nothing.
Yeah, so I'm just shocked. I mean, it's the 1830s, but good grief, I get shocked by things that happen in courts in 2025.
August 8th, 1842, Joseph and Rockwell are arrested by Illinois law for extradition proceedings. However, Joseph quickly turned to Nauvoo's legal proceedings, being an accessory to the attempted murder of Governor Boggs, conspiracy to commit murder across state lines. This was an extradition-driven charge, meaning Missouri had indicted or at least issued a warrant for Joseph on that allegation, and Illinois was asked to hand him over. It was a serious felony charge, essentially accusing Smith of ordering a hit on a former governor. Now, again, I would have said that's absurd. There is no evidence. I agree with you. But we do go back to the Grandison Newell case, and we do have Orson Hyde saying Joseph is capable of that. He has sort of wanted people dead, and
he has said that this guy should be put out of the way where the crows can't find him. A wonderful phrase, which I think I'm going to try and adopt in my future threats. But the whole thing is this. I mean, I've threatened people. I've told you I wish so and so were dead, and all the horrible things I'd like to do with them. It doesn't mean I'm actually going to kill them. I'm probably not even going to say it to them. Haven't you ever vented spleen to somebody in private about wanting somebody else dead?
In private, yes.
Haven't we all? I hope so.
I still wish ill on the man, but go ahead.
So I'm just saying that just because you say you want somebody dead or you'd like to kill them, doesn't necessarily mean that you're violent.
People are out there going, I wonder who that is. I wonder if that's Dives Lazarus. No.
This is going to be one of those answers, all of the above, just so you know.
Yeah, you can come ask me that story in private. I will tell you that story in private, but not over the airwaves. Okay. Mace. So this is the cause. May 6, 1842. We already know all that. So we'll go to the charge, being an accessory for attempted murder of Governor Boggs. This was an extradition-driven charge. We already read that. Outcome. Joseph Smith leveraged the unusually broad powers of Nauvoo's city courts. Now, again, there is no evidence, RFM. I agree with you. But in spite of that, this is the wrong way to handle something like that, although he has legal ability to do so because he's in charge of how the government is ran in Nauvoo.
Imagine if they had acquitted Orrin Porter Rockwell and convicted Joseph.
That'd be interesting, huh?
Yeah.
After his arrest, he was brought before the Nauvoo Municipal Court, which was dominated by Mormon officials. The Nauvoo court examined the arrest warrant and declared it invalid, ordering Smith and Rockwell to be released. This use of the city court to trump a state warrant was legally contentious, but Nauvoo's city charter granted habeas corpus rights that Joseph Smith used to full effect. Once freed in Nauvoo, Joseph went into hiding for several months, August to December, to avoid any further arrest attempts. During this time, he moved between safe houses, sometimes disguising himself, while his lawyers fought the extradition in the Illinois courts. Finally, the matter came to a head at the federal level. Joseph surrendered to authorities in December of 1842 under the promise of a fair hearing. In January 1843, a hearing was held in Springfield, Illinois, before Judge Nathaniel Pope of the U.S. District Court. Judge Pope quashed the extradition warrant. On January 2nd, 43, releasing Joseph, Pope ruled that the evidence was insufficient. That much we both know. And the legal basis was flawed. Importantly, Joseph Smith had been in Illinois at the time of the Boggs shooting and thus had not fled from Missouri, which was a requirement for interstate extradition.
Once again, that old fleeing or fled problem favoring Joseph.
Essentially, since Joseph was physically a fugitive from Missouri jurisdiction, he didn't meet the criteria to be extradited. And with that, Joseph escaped persecution for the Boggs assassination attempt. He wouldn't have been found guilty of this anyway. As long as Porter Rockwell, when on the stand, doesn't say, yeah, you got me. You caught us. We did it. You got us. And as long as he doesn't do that, there is no evidence for this. We're not in a day of examining bullets and you know, that kind of stuff isn't happening yet. So no way to prove it.
Yes, Illinois would have brought the case, if anybody, under these circumstances, and they chose not to.
And we all know the aftermath. Boggs survives, the case is thrown out, and we can move on. But there's Joseph Smith whispering to Orrin Porter Rockwell, and who knows what he whispered. But then Rockwell spent some time on vacation with his family in Illinois. So
for the sea air.
For the sea air, that's right. All right, 1843, second extradition attempt. I'm not even going to read this one. I'll just note it's essentially them trying to go back at getting him again. They get thwarted every time, so they come out and try to do it again. But this is treason against the state of Missouri, 1838, June 8th.
But this is great where they send over the people to arrest Joseph Smith, and one of them is from Missouri and one's from Illinois. They arrest Joseph Smith, but his friends have put their guys on it and their deputies. So they come out and they arrest the guys who arrested Joseph Smith.
Yeah, we'll show you, huh?
This is why the full faith and credit clause of the Constitution is important.
The old switcheroo, huh?
Yes. Aha.
So there's that. Again, habeas corpus there at the bottom. So here's Smith, not happy, being arrested, but little do those guys know that their carriage is about to be pulled over by a carriage, and those guys are about to be taken in, and Smith gets to go free. So those apostates never have the light in their eyes. They might have sheriff badges or deputy badges.
I got to tell you, up until the very end, Joseph Smith resembles no one as much as Bugs Bunny. He's always about to get put in that pot. And then something happens, he gets rescued until the very end. The very end, when it's like, okay, when's it going to happen? When's the thing going to happen that's going to spring me? How am I getting out of this fix, God?
It's almost like there's a God who, regardless of how much bad Joseph does, is determined to get him out of trouble anyway.
Yeah, I think God likes his spunk.
He does. All right, here's another assault, by the way. This is the 1843 assault of Walter Bagby, tax collector incident.
Well, who would convict him for that?
Nobody likes tax.
Oh, this is Bagby. This is the one you found.
Oh, okay.
Bagby.
Yeah, I don't have the document in this spot, maybe. No.
We were talking shortly before the show.
Yeah, I found a document. I'll show that to the folks here in a minute. By mid-1843, Smith was the mayor of Nauvoo and commander of its militia, but that didn't stop occasional personal disputes. In 1843, a quarrel arose between Smith and Walter Bagby, who was the Hancock County tax assessor. The dispute was reportedly over financial matters.
What a surprise.
Bagby, yeah, it's either treason or financial matters, huh?
He's a tax collector.
Yeah. Bagby may have been attempting to collect taxes or debt from Joseph or the church. Frustrated, Joseph Smith lost his temper and physically attacked Bagby, grabbing him by the throat and hitting him repeatedly. Bagby, not being a Mormon, sought justice through legal channels outside of Nauvoo's control.
Probably a good move.
Assault and battery on Walter Bagby. Yeah, try to get a charge against Joseph Smith in Nauvoo. Good luck.
Yes.
Go ahead.
The problem is we get a charge against him anywhere else. He goes in front of the Nauvoo courts and then gets released on the warrant.
Yeah. Bagby filed a complaint about the attack. Normally, this would have led to an arrest and trial in county court. Joseph Smith quickly preempted any severe consequences by exploiting his political position. He, accompanied by Nauvoo's constable and ally, J.B. Backenstoss,
and non-Mormon,
went before Justice of the Peace, Newell K. Whitney. Yes, that Newell K. Whitney of the Newell K. Whitney store.
And he is a Mormon.
Yes. And he's the second bishop in the church. Newell K. Whitney, who happened to also be Nauvoo alderman and a close associate of Joseph. In essence, Joseph brought the case into a friendly forum. Justice Whitney fined Joseph for the assault an unspecified modest sum, which Joseph promptly paid. This effectively settled the matter on the spot. By paying the fine via the Nauvoo court, Joseph avoided any further prosecution in the county circuit court. In other words, how can you be charged for the same crime in some other place when it's already been handled here?
They've got something about that in the Constitution, I think. What's that called?
That double something? Double
yes,
jeopardy.
And it's not indemnity. Double jeopardy. Yes, very good.
Bagby's attempt to press charges was headed off by this local resolution. The case demonstrates how Nauvoo's legal system often shielded Joseph, a potentially embarrassing trial for assault, which could have damaged his public image. Bagby got some satisfaction in that Joseph paid a fine, but it was likely less punishment than an independent judge might have imposed. There's Smith grabbing Bagby by the throat.
Yes. Bagby needs to get a new line of work.
And here is that, by the way. This is the document there in the top left.
Mm-hmm.
Complaint, 1st of August, 1843, State of Illinois versus Joseph Smith for assault and battery. I, Jacob B. Backenstoss, being duly sworn deposeth and says this on the 1st day of August, 1843, county of Hancock, state aforementioned one Joseph Smith committed an assault. Again, nobody's denying that he beat another guy up again.
Well, this is just the charging document.
Yeah, but he paid the fine. And so again, he was convicted.
He was. Judas Priest, Frank. That's 2 convictions by my count.
Yeah. So anyway, there's that. I'll go back here because that was the document that we were talking about. And I didn't know it went there. So here we go. Bagby. All right. We're rounding third on our way home. We just have a few more to go into.
We're in 1843. How many more people can he assault?
Yeah, this is the assault of a Warsaw man. I told you there was a bunch of them.
Oh my gosh. This is during his trip to Poland.
This might be number 4 or 5 at this point. It's at least 4, maybe 5. Assault of a Warsaw man. This is the Bennett incident, and this is not John C. Bennett. This is a different Bennett.
Is it Mr. Bennett?
September 1843, Smith had yet another scuffle, this time with a man from Warsaw, Illinois, last name Bennett, not to be confused with John C. Bennett. Warsaw was a nearby town, notoriously antagonistic toward Nauvoo. The circumstances aren't fully detailed in surviving records, but it appears Bennett provoked Joseph, possibly verbally accosting him or stirring trouble in Nauvoo. Joseph responded by beating Bennett with a cane. This kind of vigilante defense of his honor was not unusual for Joseph. Bennett decided to seek legal redress. So we have an assault and battery charge. It's assault and battery against Mr. Bennett. Let me read this again.
Okay.
Joseph responded by beating Bennett with a cane. Bennett lodged a complaint with a non-Mormon justice of the peace. So that's worded wrong. Assault and battery against Smith by Bennett. Bennett lodged a complaint with non-Mormon justice of the peace, Justice George Rockwell in Warsaw, about the caning. Justice Rockwell issued a warrant for Joseph Smith's arrest. When Constable from Warsaw, James Charles, arrived in Nauvoo to serve the arrest warrant, he was met with a surprise. Nauvoo officials informed the constable that Joseph Smith had already been arrested and tried and acquitted in Nauvoo's municipal court for that very assault. In other words, Joseph and his allies beat the outside legal system to the punch. They convened a quick proceeding in Nauvoo, likely before the mayor's court or Nauvoo municipal court, which Joseph controlled, and found Joseph not guilty of assault and dismissed the charge. This is cheating the system, RFM, when the apologists in church say Joseph didn't do anything. He was never convicted. This is what they're talking about.
Well, yes. I mean, they're wising up. The previous time they used the court system to quickly convict him and fine him a modest sum. Then they realized, wait, double jeopardy applies if I'm acquitted too. So why the hell pay anything? I'll just be acquitted, thank you. And then they can't charge me with anything else with the same thing in a different county.
By presenting this as fait accompli, what is fait accompli?
An inevitable act or conclusion, something that's inevitable.
By presenting this fait accompli, Nauvoo effectively nullified the Warsaw warrant. The constable had no authority to rearrest Joseph since Nauvoo claimed jurisdiction. Thus, so it happens in Nauvoo. The only way you can really get justice against Joseph Smith is to leave Nauvoo, go to some other place, but that takes time. And by the time you do it, all Nauvoo has to do is go ahead and try Joseph Smith for the same crime, give him a small fine, or even let him off the hook. And now you have no recourse. So you have no recourse if you do it in Nauvoo. You have no recourse if you leave.
That is the beauty of it. And the only sad part about this is that it took them until Joseph had less than a year of life left in him to discover exactly how to use this to maximum benefit. By the way, this tactic also reminds me, this is September of 1843. It reminds me of April of the following year, 1844, when the laws had a claim against Joseph in church court that he was practicing polygamy in spite of his denials. And they had all the evidence that they were prepared to present at the church court, which was slated and scheduled and they showed up with all their evidence and all their witnesses, and they were told there's no hearing. Why not? Because you were excommunicated last week at a hearing that we didn't tell you about. So you have no jurisdiction here. You have no standing. Be gone before someone drops a house on you.
There's always a workaround in Mormonism. So there it is. There's Joseph beating the man with a cane.
Ooh, ouch.
Yeah. So there's that one. 1844. So now we're in the year that Joseph Smith dies. So you can tell that we're getting close to the end.
Yeah.
1844, polygamy and perjury indictments. By the way, folks, I'll put the banner up. Actually, I won't put the banner up, but I will do this. I'll copy the link. If you want to come into the show and come in and talk with us about any of this that we presented tonight, please do. The StreamYard link is down there. If you want to be anonymous, just keep your camera off and give us an anonymous name. But please, no more phone calls. If you can come into the studio, that just makes everything run much smoother. 1844, polygamy and perjury indictments. By 44, dissent within Mormon leadership reached a crisis. Several prominent leaders, notably William Law, Joseph's former second counselor, Law's brother Wilson, and Dr. Robert Foster, broke with Smith over theological and personal issues, chief among them Joseph's secret practice of polygamy. These dissidents, feeling betrayed by Joseph's denial of plural marriage and other actions, decided to take legal action. They reported to civil authorities that Joseph Smith had multiple wives and was committing adultery since he was legally married only to Emma Smith. Furthermore, they alleged that Joseph had committed perjury by denying under oath that he practiced polygamy.
Wait a second. I knew that Joseph Smith had denied practicing polygamy, but you mean he might have been lying?
He might have been lying, huh?
This is mind-blowing to me that a man practicing polygamy might lie about it.
Yeah. In May of 44, Hancock County grand jury heard testimony from the Laws, William and Wilson, Foster, and another disaffected associate, Joseph H. Jackson. The grand jury proceeded to indict Smith on 2 charges, perjury and adultery fornication. So we see those. We know what those are. The charge perjury and fornication adultery. These indictments were handed down on May 23rd, 1844. Law's diary notes this date by the county grand jury and that was sitting at Carthage, Illinois. Joseph was served with the indictments and arrested in late May of 44.
I wonder if any of the members of the grand jury were in the Carthage Grays. Just wondering.
Yeah, well, who knows?
This is a month before.
Yeah, we're getting really close. He appeared in Hancock County Circuit Court. At the hearing, Joseph pleaded not guilty, and the judge postponed the trial till the next court term. In other words, the case was continued. Joseph was released on bail for these charges in the interim. The trial was set for later in 44, which meant that Joseph had a temporary reprieve. However, tensions in Nauvoo were at a breaking point. Joseph publicly denounced the indictments as the work of apostates. Again, this happens before the Nauvoo Expositor. So, meanwhile, William Law and his allies established a new press. But this makes perfect sense now. This all kind of helps the puzzle pieces come together. They know Joseph Smith's practicing polygamy. Joseph is indicted. He goes before a grand jury. There's a continuance. He pleads not guilty. So, of course, the best thing they can do is start to get the evidence out, start to talk about it. Best way to do that is to create a newspaper. So they create the Nauvoo Expositor to expose Joseph's polygamy and other misdeeds. Thus, the legal charge of polygamy fed directly into the next fateful incident, the destruction of the Expositor. Importantly, Joseph Smith never stood trial on the perjury and adultery charges. I would have loved Joseph to live another year or two because this would have all come to a head. His death in June 1844 intervened, unless he just left Nauvoo, Illinois, and then went west.
That's my personal conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Joseph Smith came down from the jail and walked through all of the Carthage Grays who were frozen as if some kind of spell had been cast upon them. He walked through them and kept going out to the Rocky Mountains, where he still lives today.
There you go. Him and Elvis are both there hanging out
with Bigfoot.
Yep. All right. So Smith never stood trial. His death in June 44 intervened before the court date. The mere fact of these indictments, however, was earth-shattering. For the first time, Joseph's polygamy was dragged into the public legal arena. It showed that former confidants were willing to use the law to hold him accountable. This was a severe blow to Joseph's credibility. Escalated conflict soon led to his demise. There's Joseph Smith's polygamy.
You know what's amazing about that picture, besides the fact of how similar a lot of these women look to each other? But I was counting these women, okay? And I thought, that's a lot of women for one guy to be plurally married to. The actual number is like twice this amount.
Yeah, it's 33 or 34. And here we've got about 18, huh?
I think 17, but I don't know if I counted Emma.
Well, there's Emma on the back. She's just looking over the shoulders with disapproval.
17.
Helen Mar,
including Emma. So that's 34. Is double 17.
Yeah.
Right?
So imagine a picture with twice as many women.
Yes. It's a football field of women.
So then we get to the destruction of the Nauvoo Expositor, and we all know what happened there. Joseph is, as the mayor of Nauvoo, declares the Expositor a public nuisance and gives a public order for it to be destroyed. That happens, but of course that isn't allowed. So the charge is inciting a riot and destruction of property. Essentially, Joseph was charged with unlawfully suppressing a newspaper by mob action. The warrant named him and his council members as defendants in the criminal destruction of the press. Outcome, same thing. I mean, Smith dies and in Carthage, and essentially the legal side of all of these charges just have to go by the wayside because he's gone.
The important thing, of course, being that he bailed out. He posted bail on the bail that was set for inciting a riot when he was immediately rearrested on a new charge of treason. And treason, there's no bail.
Yeah, and this is treason for the third time?
I think it's the second.
Okay.
Calling out troops against the government of the state in which you live. Your own troops, your personal militia. Yeah, it's a big deal. And so that's why he was still held in Carthage on the 27th, awaiting trial when the mobs came along.
Yeah, and Carthage was the county court's location. So
it's the county seat.
So Carthage is the correct place for Smith to go. Sometimes we get told this story as if Smith is moved to an enemy area intentionally because the enemies want to keep Joseph out of people's hands who can protect him. And the reality is this is the right place for Joseph to go. And him being held is the right thing to happen because he's committed a serious charge.
It's like any county and the county seat, whatever city that is, that's where all the county offices are, including the county courthouses.
Yeah. Constable Bettesworth in Carthage, Illinois. So there's Joseph Smith and symbolically destroying the Nauvoo Expositor. Then you've got an 1844 treason charge in Illinois Carthage Jail, which you just mentioned, going along with the same storyline. I don't think there's anything that needs to be said there. But that's serious too. Again, this was all catching up with Smith. If he would have lived another year or two, I don't think this would have ended well. And I don't think the Saints could have gotten out of having to own that Joseph Smith did some really bad stuff.
Note the language that was used there about
please.
That Joseph Smith did on or about the 19th day of June, 1844 at Nauvoo, combine with others to levy war against the state by declaring martial law and mobilizing the Nauvoo Legion to resist the state militia.
Yeah, it got serious. Again, aftermath's the same. Smith dies in Carthage Jail, and all of this has to go by the wayside. And the church and its apologists get to claim Joseph Smith never got convicted, even though we've shown 2 convictions here tonight. There's that document we showed you earlier from Bagby. All right. pretty much here towards the end, I'll
He
just
got convicted by a Mormon judge. So it must have been all fair and upright on the up and up.
a couple other little notes here. Joseph Smith was sued by a Zion's Camp veteran, Dennis Lake, disillusioned after Zion's Camp, sued Smith in 1834 to be compensated for his time. He initially won in local court, but Joseph appealed and had the ruling overturned. Lake ended up paying court costs, so actually he was the loser.
Oh, no.
Suing a constable for abuse of office in 1837, Joseph himself brought charges against Constable Abram Rich for oppression by color of office.
I'm sorry. I just saw another reason that Oliver Cowdery got excommunicated.
Yeah, look at that. 7 witnesses testified, but Oliver Cowdery, acting as justice, ruled the charges weren't proven. So he sided against Smith. Sued over Zion can't pay. That's the same story there. Joseph studied law books. So one of the things that notes that was in the sources was that Joseph studied law books at the time so that he could understand how to take advantage of the laws, how to look for loopholes. And it notes there below, the book notes, and the book, I'll show you the cover of the book that I'm talking about. The book notes that Joseph thrived on the legal system in flux, banking systems, contracts, marriages, habeas corpus. He learned the rules of the game and squeezed every advantage, pushing technicalities to shield himself. And then this is just a little side note. I was telling you this one. In my research for this episode, I came across this quote, and I had never heard it before. And you confirmed when we went over it before the show that you had never heard it before. It has nothing to do with tonight's topic, but I don't know where else I would put this quote in to make sure that I say it out loud and it's broadcast as part of an episode. So I'll say it here. When it comes to Brigham Young in the blood atonement doctrine that he taught, we often think that it originated with him. And even if Young hints that he got it from Smith, we don't really have anything from Smith that indicates clearly blood atonement doctrine, except
I will tell you that testimony from Orson Hyde was kind of getting there, wasn't it?
It was getting close.
About how Joseph was so mad at this guy because they anticipated he would bring legal action against the bank in Kirtland, this Grandison Newell, right? That Joseph Smith was saying he should be put out of the way where the crows can't find him.
Yeah. But here we have B.H. Roberts in 1909, The History of the Church, Volume 5, page 296. It also says Deseret News there.
It says Deseret News, page 296.
Archived from the original on June 29th, 2007. So that's when it was archived.
Okay.
In 1843, he, meaning Joseph Smith, or his scribe, commented that the common... go ahead, please.
Maybe it's possible the Deseret News published it. The Deseret News was the publisher. And so it wasn't the newspaper. They're the publisher of the volumes.
Yeah.
And it's page 296 of volume 5. Anyway.
That makes sense. In 1843, Joseph Smith or his scribe commented that the common execution method in Christian nations was hanging instead of blood for blood. By the way, blood for blood doctrine is mentioned in a Wikipedia reference about Joseph Smith and Brigham Young and early teachings about people paying the price for sin. And it pointed to this. So then that's how I found this. I went and found the history of the church and found the quote. So instead of blood for blood, according to the law of heaven. So blood for blood is the law of heaven. Years before making this, again, this is B.H. Roberts' editorial condensing of the history of the church saying this. Years before making this remark, however, Smith was quoted as saying that the hanging of Judas Iscariot was not a suicide, but an execution carried out by St. Peter. I'd never heard this before. In March 4th, 1843, debate with church leader George A. Smith, who argued against capital punishment, Joseph Smith said that if he ever had the opportunity to enact death penalty law, he, quote, was opposed to hanging the convict. He was, quote, opposed to hanging, unquote, the convict. Rather, he would, quote, shoot him or cut off his head spill his blood on the ground, and let the smoke thereof ascend up to God, unquote. There are enough vestiges. Am I saying that right? Vestiges? Enough vestiges. You're muted, but vestiges of Brigham Young's blood atonement here to sense that in some way this is not a coincidence. This is Brigham Young's blood atonement connected to Joseph Smith's teachings on blood for blood doctrine. You had never heard this quote either. Does this? Are you
sound kind of familiar, but only in the most distant kind of way? Like, did I really hear that before?
Yeah.
I'm still not sure where you're getting this from exactly, but
spill his blood on the ground. Yeah, I mean, we can pull up History of the Church, Brigham or B.H. Roberts, Volume 5. I'm sure there's a PDF version.
Yeah, or we could wait till Friday to pursue.
Yeah, it might be fun to show that and talk about this.
Yeah, we're already at 2 hours, so.
But spill blood on the ground. I mean, that certainly is connected. All right, now we're wrapping up. I just want to note some of the sources. Fair Mormon, not necessarily them. They present the most faithful view, but the faithful guy who's written a ton on this is Joseph I. Bentley. So he's the guy you want to look up material from for the faithful view. Also, this was the book that was referenced in the 2 slides earlier when I had like 6 little interesting side points. One of them being the guy from Zion's Camp, Joseph Smith.
I'm sorry, I'm just dying laughing. I know John Welch was involved in this. His name's there. Sustaining the Law, Joseph Smith's Legal Encounters. And we just got done reading episode after episode of how Joseph Smith sustained the law in his legal encounters.
Yeah, Smith is not sustaining the law for sure. So there's that. So that's the end, but that's a big book that you can go read if you want to get like the faithful side of things and read it. But there are plenty of articles out there, starting with Wikipedia, by the way, that post a more, I think, objective, unbiased perspective. And it's essentially the view that we presented tonight on all of these cases, which is that Joseph had a propensity to assault people often, getting angry in disputes with them, that he had not only created financial crimes against people when it came to the Kirtland Safety Society, but as we pointed out, had committed treason on a couple of occasions as well, and that often used the local Mormon government to get out of all of those things. So
it's good to be the king.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from you before we sort of close out that episode? We got a couple people down below, so we'll take
let's bring them on.
Great. Let me get rid of this.
Great job tonight, Bill. I learned a lot of stuff.
Cool. I'm glad you did. Let me get rid of that. And let's turn on the names down below. And here we have Kendall. How are you?
Hey, doing great. Fantastic episode. Wow. I had no clue about most of this stuff.
Really? Did you know that there was an 1826 and an 1830 disorderly person trial?
I had no idea. But my question is about the whole string of these, especially where like he manipulated the Nauvoo legal system to get kangaroo courts and acquitted. Like I come from the perspective of the church is going to stay around. I want to find ways to like coexist and maybe even make it better to some extent. I'm not really that involved, but all my friends and family and social existence are. So my question is, if we were fair to the LDS faithful side, like what would be a reasonable expectations to start teaching these things? Like these are completely unknown. And I think to some extent they should be known, but to what extent is that fair to both sides, to truth and history and knowing these things, and to an organization that obviously up to this point has every incentive to hide it and not have people know them?
I'm not sure, but I know that apologists will say that none of this means anything, which always reminds me of this funny line from Guys and Dolls by a lesser character named Big Julie, who says, "I always was a good guy, which I can prove by my record. 33 arrests and no convictions."
That's a great example, because one of the ways the church lost me as far as my dedication to like, well, for a lot of months I was like, well, the church isn't perfect. It had some things wrong, and maybe I don't really care as much about the truth claims, but it's essentially good. One of the top ways it lost me was that it withheld so many things from me.
Yes.
And this is just another example I'm adding to the list. And there's got to be some acknowledgement within the church that there is value in some exposure to the average member of these things when now there's essentially none.
I think that if it's hard for me to remember, I know that in church, obviously we learn about Liberty Jail and that Joseph Smith was arrested and in jail.
But we are taught what of the books is it? I think it's A Marvelous Work and Wonder. He's an innocent lamb to the slaughter. That's what I was taught about.
Right, that's the last time. That's the last time when he knew he was going to get killed, and he's prophesying all about it to everybody within earshot on the whole trip. And so he knew that that was going to be his last time to be arrested. Of course, all these things were made up afterward.
By the way, now knowing the details, it makes more sense. So Smith and Rigdon try to get away or something, don't they? And they're like at the waterfront, and Emma comes and like begs him to go back and to face. There's some story.
You mean on the island in the middle of the Mississippi?
I don't remember. I don't know. Here's what I know is that once you understand how serious of trouble Joseph Smith was in,
yes,
it makes sense that he goes, guys, if I turn myself in this time, there ain't no coming back. Because if he turned himself in this time, take out the martyrdom, there ain't no coming back from this. He's done.
But as far as the faithful perspective from my being raised in the church, all of this was because of just vague religious persecution. Like that's honest to goodness what I thought as soon as 3 years ago.
It's because the church is true and it's being persecuted.
So anyway, I want to hope that there's some push for like these things to be known. Like we've seen other examples of inoculation of the rising generation where they are teaching about Joseph's polygamy. They're teaching about some of the more controversial things. And so I just wonder if we want to make the institution better, where does teaching something like this fit in? Like in a Sunday school? Is that asking too much?
Yeah, I don't think you're ever going to get that. For the church to do it fairly, I think the church gets to keep, in most of these instances, saying, look, there wasn't any conviction in most of these instances.
Mm-hmm.
And Joseph Smith did some really bad things at various times that it sort of seems miraculous that he got out of the conviction to begin with.
Was it in the Encyclopedia of Mormonism bill where it said that Joseph Smith was never convicted? It was somewhere, or was it in something produced?
No, it was the very first paragraph in the very last sentence that claimed that he had never been convicted. And that was the Mormon story. By the way, I think Encyclopedia of Mormonism was written prior to Wesley Walters' discovery.
No, it was in the 90s.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was earlier than that. So at that point, we do know that he's as you point out, we still isn't fair to say convicted. But there are two instances where he is convicted. One of them by the LDS Church in Nauvoo, where he pays the small fine. I think an objective point of view would note the facts in each of the cases, help the reader, audience, listener, viewer understand what it looks like Joseph did or didn't do, and just note that in certain instances he was found guilty, and in certain instances he got off, and in more times than not he got off, and maybe that's a sign that he had some divine help and maybe he wasn't guilty, but the data and the facts don't look very good, do they?
Yeah, and if I were to answer my own question, the church has to do something where, when they did an acquittal, like they formed a secret judgment on him and they acquitted him beforehand, like details like that. I have to know details like that. If you continue to hide things like that, you will lose honest in heart people. That is my message.
Yeah.
These are the chickens that are famously coming home to roost when you get where you are by not telling the whole truth, and then people find out the truth. The consequences, though delayed, are worse than they would have been. How many times does it take for people to understand what Richard Nixon found out, which is the cover-up is always worse than the crime?
Yeah, it makes the church look so bad, just so bad. And it's an institution that I want sincerely to be better, because I know how much influence and how many people I love are always going to look to it. It just breaks my heart.
Yeah, I think once you know these cases and you know the data around them, it's pretty safe to say that Joseph is acting illegally and deceptively in so many of them.
And I grew up with perfectionism to know that the prophet that I sing praise to the man, you know, glory to him, like all these things, like he was perfect, was not perfect. Like that would have changed my life as far as scrupulosity and the stress and pressure I put myself under. Like, just teach the history. It will be better from top to bottom, really, if you care about end results for your members.
By the way, the church does the same thing today. It doesn't fly past me that the church today distances itself from bad behaviors by saying that nothing came about it. So, for instance, dismissing the tithing, the tithing lawsuits are found not credible enough to go to court, or when the church uses our lupa to put up tall steeples, or the SEC thing, they pay a fine, but it doesn't really go to any sort of court or something. It's just this order that says, hey, we're guilty, we'll pay $4 million. The church is constantly creating distance that says, yeah, we didn't really get into any real trouble here. We're still good guys. Trust us.
Oh, yeah. The church is a master at obscuring the facts. Like the SEC thing, for example, still to this day, everyone I talk to, even very intelligent, very informed things, they really, truly, on the faithful side, think it was just a matter of like, oh, they got confused and submitted some paperwork incorrectly. Like, what's the big deal? Like, they're just so good at spinning and getting people to believe just past the surface. They don't need to investigate anything past the surface details.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. This was such a great episode.
Take it
Thank
easy.
you, Kendall. Thanks for watching.
Yep,
Bye-bye.
always a good time. See ya.
Thank you. And now we have a person that I want to say 3 words to. As you wish. How are you doing?
Doing good.
It's the Masked Mormon.
Great to be on. Great show. Really enjoyed all that y'all do.
Are you a DC or Marvel superhero?
I'm a Superman guy all the way.
Okay.
I think he's Wesley. That's neither DC nor Marvel.
My sci-fi of choice though is definitely Star Trek.
Thank you. I think Star Trek and Star Wars have the same feature. The same basic feature is that the first was the best and everything else is dreck.
I don't know. TNG was always my go-to. So
You've got a lot in common with Bill Reel.
But yeah, great show. In fact, I recently just put out a video talking about Joseph's death. And kind of it seemed like the burning of the printing press and all that kind of stuff is kind of what set in motion just the final moments of Joseph Smith, his
Yes.
And then the fact that just doing the course of the research for my video, realizing that not only was he the mayor of Nauvoo, but also the justice of the peace, and just all these conflicts of interest. You're chief executive, but you're also an officer of the court. It's like that doesn't crankle anybody's spidey sense or whatever. So, and then yeah, finally things just got out of hand. He was once he got out of his own turf where he could essentially pull the levers of justice, then it was kind of game over. But
back in 2005, when I was reading Bushman's Rough Stone Rolling for the first time, there comes a point, and it's surprising how early it comes. I mean, it's still in June of the year, but there comes a point at which I was overcome within this feeling that things had now fallen into a channel and the result was going to be inexorable. And there was really nothing that anybody could do to stop it. It was almost like an American tragedy of sorts leading to his death.
Yeah. Well, and it does seem like the mob, I guess, did the church a huge favor because, he was martyred. You know,
Yes.
you know, the church could now build a myth around him. You know, Kendall, who was just on, you know, he asked the question of, you know, why won't the church tell the real story? And it's like, well, they can't. That's not what Sunday school is about, right? It's all about being devotional. You know, they have to have Joseph's myth in order to kind of
You have to have
their...
Joseph Smith in order to have Joseph Smith.
Yes, exactly.
And I'll just say it again. When he says, I'm going like a lamb to the slaughter, him going to prison for treason could have those same words applied to it. It's only hindsight that tells us how to interpret those words.
Look, when you have issued an order to destroy a printing press and burn all the copies of the newspaper, then called out the Nauvoo Legion, okay, to respond against the state militia. When you've done all those things, the one thing you're not going to jail as is a lamb.
Yeah. Well, I guess that brings up kind of a question is, you know, whether or not the treason charges would have stuck. Because I was kind of reading some of the, I guess, the definition for treason at the time. You know, it talks about levying war against the government and the state. And let's see here, what else? Being an adherent or enemy of the state, giving them aid or advice or comfort in this state or elsewhere. And, you know, yeah, calling up the Nauvoo Legion was, you know, very sketchy, right? But would the treason charges have actually stuck? You know, he was kind of rubber on a lot of things, and a lot of charges didn't stick. I'm sure they could have imprisoned him on other things, but what do you think about the actual treason charges, if they would have actually been able to have those stick?
Well, I think his defense would have been that he called out the militia, the Nauvoo Legion, because he didn't have them like leave Nauvoo, I don't think, or go out through the countryside or anything. It was a purely defensive action on his part. I think that would have been his defense. Whether it would have been enough to save the day, I don't know, because I don't think there was anybody in Illinois at the point who didn't have an opinion about Joseph Smith. And most of them had a bad opinion. Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Obviously, treason is the serious charge, but he also did commit perjury and was practicing polygamy. It was going to be more than just one thing, and it wasn't going to go well.
And that trial that he escaped, the polygamy and perjury trial, was very well designed, because regardless of whether he's found guilty, the evidence that this is going to bring forward would be crushing.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, I wasn't 100% convinced that he would have been stuck with treason, but all the other serious charges would have almost been certainly enough to put him away. And that would have totally changed the course of the church if it ever even survived after that. You know, probably the thing that's helped the church survive was him dying. And then, of course, you know, Brigham Young doing his stuff. But
Brigham Young had to be Brigham.
Yeah.
Joseph had to die, and Brigham had to become the new leader. I think. I mean, it was almost like it was divinely orchestrated, but maybe it was just Brighamly orchestrated.
The best thing for Joseph Smith was that he gets murdered in Carthage Jail.
For his movement, for his
reputation, character,
reputation, how history would remember him, at least among a subset of, you know, the populace.
Yeah. Well, and the myth that's kind of been built up around it, it's really powerful. You know, I've been to Carthage Jail, you know, when I was a believer, and, you know, the story they tell, and the bullet holes and all that kind of stuff. You know, yeah, it's a very powerful story. And, you know, I used to love sing praise to the man, and
it becomes a sacred place.
Yeah. You know, kind of a pilgrimage of sorts.
Bill, is there any truth to the rumor about painting the blood fresh on the floor every now and again to make sure that people could still see how red and juicy it was?
I know this to be true. Yes, Carthage Jail, the red spot on the floor, every so often the senior missionaries were instructed to put a little bit of like red paint or something down to freshen up the spot.
Oh, wow.
So that, yeah.
How do you know that to be true, Bill?
I don't remember what the source is, but let me go looking because I know Chris Bloxam knows of this as well. And he owns homes in Nauvoo, and he's very familiar with the history intimately there. He owns some of the early church leaders' homes in Nauvoo, and he's had the church reach out to purchase some of the homes in Nauvoo from him. He knows the history well, and so I'll ask him what the source is, but it is on a good account that, yes, they would go every so often and paint the spot on the floor to freshen it up.
I mean, you can't just let that fade into obscurity, can you? That's the whole point.
Mm-mm.
Well, and one of the things that I've, as I was kind of recovering from belief, I got into Noah Yuval Harari's book 'Sapiens, and I find his thesis about the need for humans to have myths very compelling. It binds us together in ways that nothing else can, and like having a foundational myth for the church is super important for it. And breaking that mythology, it's kind of hard, right? Because it becomes kind of a part of your own identity.
Yes.
And like the church just can't tell the truth. Did you ever read? I know L. Ron Hubbard's kind of on par with Joseph Smith, but did you ever read Battlefield Earth?
No, but I saw the movie once and thought that anybody else, it would have ruined their career, but not John Travolta.
Terrible movie. Never watched the movie. The book was okay, but at the end, it talks about kind of this mythology being built up about the main character, and how like his countenance changes, how they start creating art around him and stuff like that. And it's obviously a reference to Christianity and how kind of
the legends
kind of mythologize Jesus and things like that. But I found that the church is a microcosm of Christianity in general, just more recent. And so we can kind of see, kind of track what happened 2,000 years ago with kind of what happened 200 years ago. We have more.
I used to think that was a good thing. Then I found out it's a bad thing. I was shocked at how quickly.
For truth claims, for sure.
Let me go back and say what you're talking about, this mythologizing. I had thought this would be something that would take a long time, centuries, for mythologies to develop and then become embedded and believed by a large group, right? No. It's incredible how fast it can happen. In Mormonism, you've only got a matter of years between Joseph Smith dying and Brigham Young taking over August 8th, 1844, that meeting. And you only have like less than a decade, less than 2 decades, certainly, before the first person starts saying, hey, I saw Brigham Young turn into Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
And everybody just going, yeah, that happened. And that becomes something that everybody is taught and everybody is supposed to believe in this church, because it's essential that we have a miracle that is God's stamp of approval on Brigham Young being the new leader. And that's why it was created, I believe. But the fact that it only took a few years for something completely didn't happen to be have a miraculous thing ascribed to it and then have everybody believe it doesn't take that long at all.
Yeah, and then when it's feelings based, and you kind of self-doubt is kind of necessary as well, because you don't have those experiences. I never had those experiences as far as like seeing somebody transfigured or whatever. But you're like, well, maybe somebody else did, so I have to maybe trust their testimony.
Oh, absolutely. I saw Rich Little do some impressions once, but that's about as close as I've gotten to it. No, we are as humans, I guess, but as Mormons specifically, we are designed to believe anything and everything that supports what we already believe, no matter how crazy it is.
We're belief engines, I think. Yep.
Just FYI, I'm trying to find this from a source online too. So somebody in a forum on Ex-Mormon, I don't know how accurate this is, so I don't know, but it says Don informed me. I think it's talking about Don was mentioned. Let me see if that says who. It doesn't. So it says, Don informed me that no, that stain was not Hiram's blood or Joseph's. The historic sites restoration people are very careful with this sort of thing. The son of the owners of the jail, by the way, my memory is that it has to do with the owners of the jail as well. Okay. Acquired it in early in the 20th century, recalled that the floor had been replaced. The timbers of the floor were cut with a type of saw that did not exist during Joseph Smith's lifetime. So the stain that for so many years was under glass and a highlight of the Torah was just that, a stain and not Hiram's blood. Just FYI. So what they're saying is that the restored floor was newer. It wasn't original to their death. And that seems to coincide with what I remember about my source.
Wow. Well, of course, if you own the thing, I mean, it's a tourist attraction. It's like you are going to have dinosaurs on your dinosaur tour. You are going to have the blood of the prophets on the second floor of the Carthage Jail, aren't you?
It's a regular P.T. Barnum thing, right?
Yeah. So anyway, well, there's that.
So,
well, Mass Mormon, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I enjoy all that y'all do.
Awesome. Have a great day, my friend.
You too.
Yes, I feel like you're taking a break from crime fighting just for us. Thank you. And hey, let's be careful out there.
Yeah, well, we did it again. Another episode of Mormonism Live. Folks, please hit the like button, hit subscribe. Please donate. Please go to mormonismlive.org. Click the donate button. We survive on donations. The time we spend researching history, coming on multiple times a week, presenting episodes. We're doing it now, 3-4 days a week at least. So please support the program, support the work that we do, support RFM and myself. mormonismlive.org. Click the donate button. That's how we do it. Folks, we will see you on Friday at 8 p.m. for Mormonism After Dark, where we let loose a little bit and misbehave a touch. And
you may even see Kweku's new music video.
I hope we see at least a few seconds of it, because that guy's not, I was going to say he's not clowning around, but I'd be wrong. We'll see what happens.
Well, he's still trying to find himself.
Yeah, well, good for him. Good luck in that endeavor. RFM, it's always a pleasure. And we'll see you guys Friday. And if not, Monday for the newscast at 6. And then otherwise, we'll see you on the flip side for next week's Mormonism Live. Ton of fun. Good night, everybody. And thank you for joining us.
Good night.